Welcome everyone to the brand spanking new PIPCAST 3000, a standard issue podcast where we discuss things like Fallout, current trending games, and maybe even other mediums such as tasty jams or words on paper, maybe even movies.
Maybe.
I don't know, we didn't even talk about that. I'm Caedo Genesis.
I am Bad Company Sarge.
And we have a special guest today, a returning founder of whatever this is now. Hi, Tony.
Hey, I am Tony or Tony Mo, I guess. Used to talk about a lot of games, still kind of talk about a lot of games, but mostly focusing on Anthem stuff right now. But yeah, all the video games are the good video games.
What percentage of your content would you say is Anthem related in the past year?
It's probably pretty high. It's probably, I mean, if you like look at recently uploaded videos, probably 98%. So yeah, I mean, you guys know it's hard to like shift topics. There'll always be that like one person in chat's like, you should talk about other games, and then you do it and it gets like 10 views and you're like, I'm never talking about other games ever again.
Yeah.
So
I think I think I first found your channel when you were doing Titanfall 2 stuff. I can still remember you talking about like doing live commentaries and having the odd comment from someone saying, "Oh, do something other than Titanfall 2." And the videos that weren't Titanfall 2 got no views. The videos that weren't Titanfall 2, thousands.
I mean, I'd love to like talk about like everything else under the sun, but considering I now do it like as an actual financial source, it's like have to be, you know, a little bit more some people are like, well, just do one video every week, and I'm like, well, that's one video that could potentially be hundreds of dollars, and instead it's going to be like $5. So you're basically asking me to cut $100 out of my weekly paycheck. You know, it's like, as much as I'd love to, gotta, you know, eat, pay the bills and whatnot.
It's making that business decision. Yeah, I'm just over here still doing whatever I feel like without getting extra money for it.
That is probably actually the best thing about if you're doing YouTube and not worrying about the money. Is then you can literally actually pretty much do anything, I guess, depending on
in a way
how
it's
caught up you get on growth.
Yeah, it's the balance of time in my case though, because like I do have the job. I work, you know, 3 days a week, and then the rest of the week I have for like taking care of stuff here, and then also taking care of stuff on the channel.
And actually trying to be a human being along the way.
Trying to function.
That just doesn't happen.
Trying to sleep and eat and maybe see the sun every now and then.
I have not seen the sun.
I was about to say, does the sun still exist?
That's like today the sun is actually out, and I'm just going to be literally in a car and then in my office all day. And it's like, I should probably stick my head out the window at least and get some vitamins.
Yep. A little bit. Anyway, so Tony was actually the one who allowed us to use the PIPCAST name, because he and I did the PIPCAST around the time of Fallout 4's release, and a little bit of time after that. We did a couple of cool interviews and stuff like that, and it was a good time. Yeah,
it was. We were actually also, I feel like we were probably maybe some of the first people to be like super vocally critical of Fallout 4 to the point where we made people kind of angry. Because it was like, I mean, we made it like a cast like every single week. So as we played Fallout 4 and like, you know, found out the things we loved and the things we really didn't love, we were pretty vocal about that. That was always a fun show to do, because I think that was the first time where I realized that people have a really hard time like actually, you know, enjoying something if they see any bad. You know, they can't like a game if it's all bad. I feel like that's kind of like the precedent for the way people are now. Like everything has to be a 10, like we were just talking about. And Fallout 4 was like totally that game for me. It's like, well, I still love it. I just think it sucks in a lot of ways. Like, doesn't mean I hate the entire thing and I'm not gonna play it, you know. So that was an interesting journey.
Well, one that comes to mind right now is Kingdom Hearts 3, because I played through that nonsense.
I've heard so many like, I'm not like personally a Kingdom Hearts person, but I've heard, you know, like the typical person who was just like always going to love it, even if it was 3 seconds of you just looking at Goofy juggling, I don't know, golf balls or something. But then I've heard so many other people who are just like the first 45 minutes is like, what?
I've enjoyed the series, and I enjoy the gameplay of the game, but when they were trying to tie it all off, and even now, it's a mess. And there's no way to recover.
How many years has it been even anyway now for between the two?
It's been 13.
13. Jesus. I thought it was like 6.
Yeah.
13. Man.
Yeah. All the spin-offs in between. where they made the story more and more complicated.
Kingdom Hearts 3.5.4 minus 2.
Yeah, no, here's the funny thing. They're coming out with DLC that's going to tie off some more loose ends.
Oh, yeah.
Some stuff they should have
I don't envy
done.
anybody who's had to work on a project like that.
BTW. Yes.
That's like the sucker who has to like actually make Half-Life 3 if it ever happens.
Yeah. So anyway, why don't we go into the the tip of the day before we get too far off track? How about Bad Company Sarge?
Alrighty, our tip of the day is using food items to heal yourself as well as stim packs in the recent Fallout games. With stim packs, they may be nice for healing and all, but you have to do that funny animation where you stab yourself in the arm. Eating food, pretty much instant healing, and you can keep fighting whilst you're doing it.
Yeah, and food also gives you cool buffs sometimes.
Yeah, cooking's where it's at, man. That's like the most underrated thing you can do in like any of the last few Fallout games. New Vegas, you know, Fallout 4, 76. Cook stuff. It's good for you.
Yeah. Also the like combined chems on top of that. I think it is between New Vegas and 4, or even New Vegas and 76. Like, if you can make like party time mentats from like New Vegas or Turbo, or going all the way to like Psycho Buff and Overdrive and stuff like that in Fallout 4, freaking ridiculous. If you have any interest or inclination of using chems in those games, they really make you into like a superhero, more so than the protagonist already is.
Yeah, it's a fun way to push into like harder content, you know, like in some of the areas of the map and stuff, without really maybe being like entirely geared out, you know, otherwise.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't run power armor.
Yeah, and I remember it helping quite a bit in survival mode in Fallout 4 as well. So our summary of what's going to go on today is our Fallout topic will be carrying on from the last PIPCAST that we had. So we were talking about how the mainline games, Fallout 1, 2, 3, 4, have changed over time. And now we're going to go over, or this podcast, we're going to go over the spin-off games. You know, Fallout Tactics, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout Shelter, and Fallout 76. Like, we're going to go over all of those and how they've changed, both changed over time and also changed how things kind of are or have been in the whole franchise. And 76 is, of course, in the spin-off area. And we're also going to go over some news, starting with the news. We're going to talk about the huge roadmap for Fallout 76 that has come out, thankfully. Yeah. And also Anthem's rough release, and that's all I had planned. And the Fallout Amazon teaser thing, or questionable. Don't even know if it's Fallout.
Questionable teaser leak Fallout, maybe not so much thing.
Something that may or may not exist.
Okay, so roadmap?
Sounds like a good place to start, because it's relevant. I think, by the time this comes out, it'll be like less than 2 weeks before the stuff from the roadmap starts kicking in, actually being live.
Yeah, March 12th will be the whole welcome to Wild Appalachia and brewing and distilling.
Yeah, buddy.
The brewing and distilling, I'm very glad to see coming in. And they showed on the most recent Inside the Vault, but it's not just like, oh, you can make your own beer. It's proper fancy stuff. Like there was I think like Firecracker beer was one of the ones they pointed out, where it like deals flame damage to you and melee targets you attack.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this is actually really interesting stuff that they're bringing in with
that
this.
up again.
Oh, it's cool to see. Especially seeing as right now in Fallout 76, alcohol is kind of like, it's good for an extra point of strength or something, but alcohol-based builds aren't really a thing because it's not worth it.
Yeah, it's just a good way of drunkenly getting a little bit too much gear back to your place without having to dump it on the ground when you're over in
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, Firecracker Whiskey.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, your melee attacks will result in self-immolation, damaging both you and your attackers. These have like a fresh effect and a vintage effect. The vintage one being, in addition to its fresh effects, Firecracker Whiskey will set enemies on fire with your ballistic and melee attacks. So your bullets get set on fire if it's vintage.
Incendiary rounds
aged.
from getting drunk.
So like, they have an aging system for it, just like food going bad. I'm assuming then, like it just actually ages on its own.
I guess so. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I did read something about it, saying there were like not just a crafting bench for the whatchamacallit, I can't even remember the name of it, the brewing station, but also like a fermenter that they had active as well.
Okay, so you could like maybe manually age it more, like, or ferment it more.
Yeah, I'm reading through the thing just now quickly.
Because it's also distilling, so there's also, I got Nuka Shine, okay, so Nuka Shine, and then, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, place drinks within the fermenter to reduce the wait time needed to try your latest creations. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be just, oh, you instantly craft it like everything else in the game. Instead, it will likely be a case of you get the ingredients, then it'll be a timer that runs down until it's there. And yeah, let them age long enough and they will change from fresh to vintage. So that'd be interesting, having timer-based mechanics for crafting, which we have not seen in any Fallout game, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like the idea in general of buffs that like also debuff like that, because I think this is actually the perfect game for that sort of thing, because there are so many instances where you can go kind of into an area where you're under-leveled, and having like a slew of ways in which you could just, you know, kind of like make yourself a glass cannon real quick to deal with some stuff, even if you're below level, is pretty neat. Or if you're just soloing maybe, and there's a lot of enemies around, who know, you know, especially something like fire, if it, I don't know if it's going to necessarily like catch multiple enemies on fire, but even if it catches one on fire with every like bullet, you know, that's some good damage over time potentially. That's pretty cool. I like the idea of that.
Do grenades count?
I'd assume they wouldn't be affected, because I mean you get Molotovs already, which are fire, unless you need more fire with your fire.
I'd like more fire with my fire.
Molotov frag grenades.
Even if like, if you had used like the grenade rifle or like grenade machine gun.
Yeah, that would probably work, I guess. Yeah, if they include heavy weapons as well, you can get like missile launchers, but are incendiary. Like Gatling lasers.
It's going in the direction that I want it to.
Yeah.
Making different ammo types for explosive weapons.
I think it's a very good sign of what more could come in the future that we also don't know about. Because when I first saw like the roadmap poster and they were like, hey, you can craft beer, I was like, that's just like a small thing they're adding, I guess, to make it so you can craft stuff that's already in the game. I'm not going to worry too much about that. But the fact they've shown just in the tiny little Inside the Vault article, which is like the shortest one we've seen so far, they've been like, oh yeah, this is actually really fancy, cool stuff we're doing. It's nice to see, and makes me more reassured about covering the game, because right now there's not a lot to talk about, but in like 2 weeks' time, we're going to start getting stuff going every single week.
Yeah, I totally lost my motivation for the treasure map guide.
Yeah, I'm really annoyed you have as well, because I've been hoarding treasure maps till you make that guide.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I feel like the game's in a, I don't know, Fallout 76 is like an interesting game to me, because I don't think it has the problem that most games have when we talk about live services, which most people like are like, oh, there's not enough content. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff to do in 76, but I don't know, like, what is just like the way it's presented that is weird, and then maybe there's not just enough little stuff like this, you know, like the crafting and distilling. I mean, I know, like, you know, like the camp, the ability for players to actually like vend their own stuff, that's going to be kind of a big deal, I guess, for like the role-playing aspect of the game, so that's cool. That's
on top of the brewing and distilling that they're going to put in. I think those are kind of going to be in like tandem with each other. I mean, it's going to be in that section of the year. Everybody wants an opportunity to sell the things they've collected without just like selling them to a vendor for nothing.
Yeah. Selling to a vendor is absolutely terrible with anything actually good. Like chems and drugs and food and stuff sells for a decent price, but I've had like 3-star legendary weapons that are worth like 20 caps maybe.
Yeah,
you get more from that.
Economy is very weird. Doesn't feel like a traditional video game economy at all.
Yeah, or even selling serums, mutation serums you've made, instead of having to, you know, buy them from the bunker under the White Spring for lots.
For all of your caps. Just
all the caps you have.
Give all of the caps to them. It's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I've made like I think a couple of videos where I've complained a little bit about the whole cap system in Fallout 76, because right now it does feel like you basically need to build your way up to maximum caps, which takes dozens of hours, to buy like a few good plans at most, and then you go back down to 0 caps and have to build all the way up again to buy it all. So if they could do stuff to actually incentivize player trading more, such as having the player trading machines at people's camps, that'll go a long way to making that entire process less painful.
It's probably gonna be helped somehow. Adding value to new things besides just legendaries too. I think that needs to be a thing, because legendaries are kind of like the only, besides caps, seem like the only currency right now, really.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like mutation serums, kind of, but with how rare they are, it's like,
yeah.
I know 2 people who can make a mutation serum.
Yeah,
So-
but like when I'm thinking more like more sought after than serums, because a lot of times people don't even think about it, because serums in particular, because of how expensive they are, and now they can actually see how expensive they are in the bunker,
Yeah.
and that incentivizes it less, at least to me. But I would like to see, hopefully with the brewing and distilling thing, that it's going to incentivize people, selling what they've brewed, because I have a feeling that it's going to take time for each of these things, for stuff to get brewed and whatnot. And somebody could be brewing up, like I could be brewing up one thing, and then you guys could be brewing up something else, and then we could either trade it or start, I guess, our own market for it.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be quite good for people who do like to play as merchants and stuff in the game, which isn't really all that viable right now. Like,
Yeah.
Caedo, you've got someone in your Discord who did the whole merchant thing for a while.
He's
But
gone
it's-
totally silent.
Yep, because it's just like, I totally get why, because he was buying the odd legendary and selling the odd legendary and questing out to get legendaries, but I imagine it was just incredibly repetitive for him and had no variation.
Well, not just that, but once they put the hard cap of 1,500 units of weight on a person,
Yep.
like, he was screwed, because he had well over 1,500 units of weight. Like, it would take a full minute for his inventory to load up.
What? Oh my god, dude. Yeah, that's like, the game just, because they talked about player vending a long time, before the game was even out. Like, it was initially something that sounded like it was going to be in the game at launch, and I think it was like a last minute delay, which is why we got the stupid robot vendors who just, are literally just a way for players to essentially dump equipment because they're worthless otherwise. You're not earning coin, you're not earning anything from them. And the game at this point either needs to make this player vending thing super viable, which means that players need to essentially replace what would have been an AI vendor. Because that's what I think, like, that's one of those things where I like a lot of the world building in 76, but that's one of those areas where I agree with, like, every person who reviewed the game who said it doesn't feel like a world because there's just all these random players running around and, like, a few robot NPCs. It's like when you don't have some sort of a vendor, you lose that whole, like, sort of surviving the wasteland, selling to people. Like, the only vendors you really get are like, the super mutant guy, right, who shows up.
Yeah, Grom.
And that's, like, it, So you need, like, players to fill in for that. But like you guys are saying, it can't just be like, I'm gonna go farm these legendaries. Like, they need to be able to sell really basic items. Like, I need to be able to say, oh, I'd really like to craft this gun right now, and I really don't feel like going out and looking for whatever, glass or something like that. So I'm just gonna go find John, who always is on one of the servers somewhere, whatever.
Yep.
It's weird too, because like, since you are just on random servers, it's gonna, it's likely gonna rely a lot on either there being somebody who's a merchant on every single server, which again would require the game to really incentivize that, or you are part of a community, like you're on somebody's Discord and they're like, I'll join your game and then, sell you stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. I think there's a lot of cool potential for it. I just think there's no real framework set up to make it, like, work as well as it needs to.
Yeah, there's a... Yeah. I think you summed up the entirety of Fallout 76.
Like, I really do. I love, like, the adventure stuff. I'm super excited for Ever Upwards. I think that's going to be really cool. Like, a whole new quest line that gives you, like, a customizable backpack. I don't even know what that means, but I love the idea of it, and I hope they do...
Yeah.
I just think that's the thing, is they really need to push on the, like... Don't even worry about, like, the co-op aspect of the game or anything. Just, like, the mindset of a survival game as an individual where you can also access all these great little storylines. It's like they can build around that and give players, more tools for that actual survival experience. Like, there should be special backpacks in this game. When they talk about a backpack like that, okay, well, why don't we have, like, 4 different kinds of backpacks? Like old school World of Warcraft, where it was like you've got a a pouch for, you know, potions, a pouch for crafting materials. Why not let a player like your friend who is trying to be a merchant have a backpack that holds more weight, but it can't carry like weapons? It's only for, you know, crafting items. So
That's actually pretty smart.
Like,
and I hope they considered that.
like, that would be so cool. You know, then that's like merchant's incentive then. Like, this guy can run around like a pack rat, just picking up like all the duct tape rolls, you know, like all the screws and all the pieces, and then he can actually, like, you know, have a profitable means out of it. Again, I just think they're too caught up in everything's got to be this this grind outside of the missions. Like, the missions are so good in this game too. I love the little storylines. It's just, I just hope they can build up the rest of this stuff.
Yeah, and the I am greatly looking forward to the extra quests that are going to be coming along with these things, and especially the Fashnacht event that I was so worried about. I was so worried about the masks becoming Atom Shop items, and I was about to like throw up my hands and be like, yeah, I have nothing to do anymore.
Thank goodness they didn't do that.
Because there's one available in the game right now, and there's 2 locations for it, and that's part of why I was concerned, because they did that with a whole bunch of items in the game where they were like incomplete or like not even part of their set, and just kind of out and about. The last guide that I did was for the 3 Halloween costumes, and the witch outfit in particular. You can only get the dress by making it with a plan, and the hats are everywhere. The witch's hats are in a lot of different locations, but you can't make the dress unless you run into a random location of a dead trick-or-treater and get the plan to make it, or find that Vendortron, that randomly spawning Vendortron.
The horrible one, which I hate. Yeah.
Charleston area, yeah. That Sarge spent an entire day trying to get to spawn. But there's lots of inconsistencies in the game like that, which definitely implies that a lot of things were rushed when it comes to like things placed in the world.
Yeah, I can't fathom like the development cycle for this game. I know it's like a spin-off, and they're like, oh, we got like another team that's also been.
Oh, I'm betting a whole lot that it was messy.
It's just like, yeah, I think from the publishing side of it, they get way too comfortable with the amount of money that people spend on their games. And I mean, 76 is actually a perfect example of that, because it's actually sold really well, despite the terrible reviews. And I think every time it just feels like Bethesda just manages to squeak a little bit of like of their magic into it. Like, again, the world building for this game, like, I think if you gave it any sort of an actual chance when it came out, you would have like fallen for just the mission stuff and just funning around and exploring and doing the little quest. I mean, that's how my friends and I played.
The stage they set is fantastic.
Yeah, you know, but like you said, everything else there's so many like cool ideas that could have been, would have been, but it all just feels like, you know, doesn't even really feel like groundwork. It just feels like leftover like memories of what could have been sometimes, and what wasn't.
Yeah, or like us imagining like how it should have been at launch, and now it's getting closer to that, but this is 4 months after launch.
Yeah.
And it's not even there yet.
Yeah.
I can feel the disappointment in the community, and also I don't know, from fellow creators, because there's only so many of us that are actually willing to do content on 76 anymore.
Yeah, well, the amount of people who after like a week or 2 went nope and just washed their hands of it was kind of crazy.
Yeah. I want to do a shout out to Miniature Nerd though. John.
Yep.
He is an amazing individual. How he can so eloquently put into words. I mean, given it's like 2 hours or more about him talking about what his ideal Fallout 76 is, what 76 was doing, what they were trying to do, or at least in his mind, what they were trying to do, and what he hopes for. He put it in such a nice, concise, I don't know if you can call it concise, but a nice, a nice way that entire video is definitely worth watching. I watched it probably earlier this week.
Yeah.
At higher speed. I watched it at like 1.25 speed, just because the length of the video is just ridiculous.
I watched the full, like, 2.5 hours of it, and he paces it very well. That's like,
He does.
That's the best compliment I can give to that video, because I think the only other video I watched close to that was Camelworks' Fallout 3 Easter egg one. And at that, I found myself, like, occasionally checking the time, seeing how long had gone along, as you often do. During the Many a True Nerd's Fallout 76, I can't even remember the title, but during the video he made, I don't think I even thought about checking the time until I was like, oh wait, he's doing the outro now. Because everything he said just flowed so well, and it was really eloquent. It was very impressive.
It's called What Went Wrong and How to Fix It. Fallout 76. Definitely. I'm just going to link it in here to remind us, I guess, too. But it's definitely worth a listen if you guys haven't already. You can listen to it like you would a podcast, like what we're doing right now. Give it a listen. John is probably one of the best representatives of the Fallout community, at least in my mind. Because he always approaches it, or at least he appears that way, that he always approaches it with a fair mind and one that wants basically whatever he's talking about to succeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, I appreciate the way people like him go about stuff, because I think it's easy to criticize a game and to like make a review, but it's much harder to actually sit down and like try to explain to people like, here's the things I like and here's what I would like to see them do, especially, you know, without just going total video game commenter, here's all the best ideas, without really, you know, being reasonable about those ideas, you know, which is the average person on YouTube just screams, the game needs to do all these things and I need to be able to fly rocket ships. You know? Not
even that though. Like, a lot of the people have complaints but don't have solutions too, with a lot of the especially like negative following the hate train type reviews. They're just like, oh, this sucks, and this sucks. Yep. Do something about it.
Yeah,
like
I always like to say I don't expect people to be able to like give me a detailed like answer to what the perfect answer would be, because I don't think anybody has that right, and like not everybody's a game dev and everybody knows it's possible. But if you can't at least tell me what you would have enjoyed, then you know you're not really putting any worth into
what you'd appreciate
the conversation. And on that subject, I wonder if like we see all these games right that are able to make. I think a lot of people like to use they either use the term too little, too late, or they use the term like first impressions, and those first impressions were bad, and the first impressions are everything. And I completely disagree, because video games aren't human beings. This isn't, you know, Dave who is getting married to your sister and you meet him for the first time and he's a total douche. This is a video game. Like, if you bought it and you didn't like it and you still own it and it's got free updates, I can guarantee you're going to come back if suddenly, you know, your favorite reviewer is like, the game's amazing now. I mean, No Man's Sky, Rainbow Six Siege, Sea of Thieves, like the list just goes on and on. So I think like there's always an opportunity for Bethesda to make 76 like the game they probably want it to be and that the fans want it to be. I guess the question just is like, can they actually do it technically? Can they do it financially? Is, you know, ZeniMax and everybody going to let them do that? Would be, you know, without murdering the game with like loot drops and paid loot crates before they even get to that point? You know, is at some point the higher up's just going to say, screw it, you know, throw a month's worth of loot crates in there and then call it after that to see how much money we can make, because I mean, business,
and that would be the time where a lot of the rest of us leave.
Yeah, the game would just die, you know, and they just don't care, right? There's so many of them are so caught up with the short term, you know, and that's very much EA. Like, to talk briefly about Anthem, you know, EA with their obsession with pushing Origin Premiere. They're like so caught up in the idea that people are going to subscribe to the service for like a year just to play this game. It's like, no, they're going to subscribe for 1 month. You got $15 out of them. How do you feel now? You got $15 out of somebody, whereas the people who paid $75 for your game didn't get early access. Like, in what world is that a good business decision? You know, like,
was that how it worked?
That's how it works.
They had to have
EA
Origin
Premiere,
access,
which is only on PC. No, well, if you have Origin access or EA access on PC and Xbox, you get the 10-hour trial, which they've been doing that for like a year now. That's not good. But Origin Premiere is their new service, which is $15 a month, and in itself, it's if you like subscription-based stuff, it's a good deal. I don't like subscription-based stuff because it always screws over the devs for the most part, but like you do get a bunch of games for $15. But that was the only way to get full access to the game a week in advance. If you paid $70 for the collector's edition, though, you didn't get any early access. You didn't even get a 10-hour trial. Nothing.
That's terrible.
That's the thing. I played a little bit of Anthem because I've got like the basic EA Origin Access thing. I got it like ages ago. I did a full year for something or other. I think it was just for a whole bunch of games that were in the vault, as they call it.
Yeah.
So I was able to do like a bit of the trial for Anthem. And I was like, oh, I'm not a huge fan of this, so I'm not going to pick it up. Whereas, and I believe it was like the demo version during the 10-hour trial as well, as opposed to the full
Yeah, you
one.
got access to the 2 demo weekends, yeah.
Yeah, which means it's not even as good as the game itself is. So I got like a very kind of rushed first impression, because I knew I was on a timer. I was just like, okay, I've got basically zero investment in this because I'm not paying for it and haven't really considered a purchase for it. I'm just like, oh, it's here, I'll give it a go and not really care too much. And I was like, oh, I don't like the flying too much. And then I put it down, and I've not really thought about jumping into it too much since, even though it looks kind of cool.
Yeah,
I'm just like, no, I played a tiny bit.
They did this with Battlefield 5 too, and the bigger problem with Anthem was like, so they got people playing the full game a week before launch when the game still needed a day one patch.
Yeah.
I mean, the day one patch didn't fix everything. I did my review before then because everybody was like trying to tell me like, but there's a day one patch, and I'm like, it's not going to change the fundamental design of the game. It's bug fixes. Like, my whole review isn't me screaming about bugs. Like, that's a problem, but, you know, like, and so, yeah, I reviewed it well before the day one patch, because it's like, I'm sorry, but you were giving people access to the full game, you charge them for it. Like, you know, I don't even care if it's your $15 subscription. Like, it's just, it's that concept that EA and a lot of publishers have of, let's just get money as quickly as we can right now and not actually worry about the long-term profitability of anything. You know, which is really bizarre. It's just like, that's not a good business idea, but you know, that explains EA's the trend with EA over the years. And even like ZeniMax, they've made a lot of poor decisions like that, you know.
Looking at it from somewhere, I guess someone on the outside, I'm trying to put it into words. I didn't have a full understanding of their staggered release, and that's a bad sign.
Yeah, I mean, no one did, right?
Yeah,
To me.
it was stupidly complex.
When you have to have a chart
Yeah.
to explain it, and then that's always the thing, that there's always people in the community who think like any sort of criticism against something like that or feedback against that is like a lash out. And I had so many people who are like, they came into my like stream and stuff to like, Tony, why is everybody making a big deal out of this? I was like, what do you mean why they're making a big deal out of this? I was like, to the average person, I was like, this makes no sense. I was like, why should anyone have to look at a chart? I was like, and
Hello, I'm average.
going beyond that even, I was like, why is someone who paid $70 for the game not getting early access? I was like, you know, there's so many problems. I was like, don't sit there and defend them. I was like, this is not to be defended. Like, this is a very poor business decision. And like you said, for the person who hasn't been following the game for 6 months, you know, a year, a week, and who, you know, has all the time in the world to just sit there and figure out what the hell this company's doing, it's a load of BS. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hating the fact that a lot of games are having these weird staggered launches, because Anthem had it, Battlefield 5 I think had it as well. I've got a friend who covers that, and he did a video just trying to explain another chart that was put up.
They did the
even-
exact same thing Anthem did,
Yeah.
because Origin Premiere launched like just before that game. In fact, they like Origin Premiere was actually revealed alongside of Battlefield 5, and then they just
like-
yeah.
Skirt it
Yeah.
all. Even Fallout 76, I wasn't happy with it being like slightly
Yeah.
skewed, because there was the beta and the Xbox beta before
Yeah.
the PC beta, and even when it was
Yep.
supposed to go live, they actually, I think, messed it up and everyone got it live at once, I want to say, but it was supposed to be like time zone based, so it slowly rolled out. Just
Yeah. It was a oops. Hi. You all got early access now.
I'd much rather have a game just come out at a set time
Yeah.
and that be it. Just make it simple.
It's so weird, and like, you know, the like smart side of it would be a developer saying we want to stagger it just for server stuff, but that's never why it's staggered. It's always like some dude with money in his hands in someone else's pockets, like, oh, well, we can make a little bit of money if we just do this exclusive thing. The Division 2 is doing a bunch of that. Like, that game's trying really hard to be this great sequel, and I think it's doing a lot of cool stuff, but they've got all this stupid exclusivity stuff happening for a game that is like a live service, and it's like, you can't launch this shared world experience and then just start bracketing things off behind different platforms. Like, everybody is trying to exist in the same world, and Destiny 1 did this with their PlayStation exclusivity. I mean, there were weapons that it took a full year to get on Xbox. like Hawkmoon and Jade Rabbit and entire maps and an entire strike. And it's like, you know, who gets to make the decisions over there that's like, let's cut off like this massive chunk of content from an entire player base just because platform exclusivity, you know, $1 million deal. Like, it's the money, man. The greed and the money is one of those big things slowly killing the games industry, that's for sure.
Ouch. It's true though.
I mean,
real talk with Tony Mo.
I mean, you can look at, you know, like you know, there's all these. We were just talking about The Witcher 3 earlier.
Yeah.
And like, you know, the City of Projects and like that position, like they have to be seriously working like, you know, 18-hour work days for Cyberpunk at this point.
Oh, easy.
Because they're losing money. I mean, GOG just laid off like a dozen people at what is already a very small staffed company.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, and so they're like bleeding money over there, you know, and like, yeah, it's all great. They get like a grant from the Polish government for making cool video games, like, but that doesn't, you know, pay people's, you know, long-term salaries.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, whatever they might have had, which is the whole Hideo Kojima mindset of like, take as long as we need to make a game, you know, until we essentially make a corporation lose so much money that they say get the hell out.
Well, even though they probably shouldn't have, they went ahead and paid extra royalties to the author of the Witcher books too, right?
I think that's still ongoing, right? The last I heard of it, they like denied to pay, but maybe that's changed since then.
They agreed to recently.
Did they? Okay, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it was a pretty hefty sum.
So yeah, you know, it's not a good place to be in financially for a company that
that may have like kind of trickled down into, you know, the GOG stuff.
Yeah, that's a very real possibility. And that's like,
for those who didn't know, CD Projekt Red, GOG, Good Old Games is their domain.
Yeah, they started it.
Yeah.
Also, you should look up GOG documentary by NoClip if you are curious about that.
Yes.
That's a really great documentary.
Anything by NoClip, really.
Yeah, just watch all their stuff, including their videos on The Witcher 3 that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and that's unfortunate for a company like them because they're like kind of like AA development, you know, where they're just like hanging on there. And so they can't actually afford to have something like that happen. Where meanwhile, you know, like the Activision layoffs were absolutely unnecessary. Why are you laying someone off when a CEO just took a $15 million bonus, you know? It's very bizarre. Do you guys want to talk more about Anthem though? Because I just got us way off subject like I always do.
Yeah, no, it's fine, dude. that's kind of the point of podcast. But I was gonna say, how was the Anthem launch for you? I mean, you already kind of talked about how you handled it, but like,
oh yeah, I mean, it was
how was it?
Like, to cover it was fine. I did what I usually do when a new game comes out, is I just like slip into my little coma of like, I just want to play this and experience it, and not like start pumping out guides like some people do right away. I just can't bring myself to, especially when there was so much else to talk about the game. So I was pretty adamant to get that review out pretty early, just because for me it was like I kind of had like, I think I've had the most reasonable expectations of anybody covering the game, because there are a lot of people who are just like convinced it's going to be, you know, absolute dog poop. Which, of course, if the game gets a 6 or a 7, they get their way, because a 6 or a 7 is apparently garbage in the modern, you know, YouTube era. So they got their way. But I was in the line of, like, this isn't going to be what people think it is. A lot of people, I think, set an expectation based on their time with, like, Destiny and The Division. Games that end up having a lot of, like, diverse endgame content. And Anthem, like, always was advertised, like, in the live streams the dev team did, as, like, this is kind of like Diablo. Like, we've got 6 different difficulty levels for you to grind through, and each one gives you a slightly increased chance to get, like, the highest rarity loot. So it's going to be all about builds and, like, the endgame chase. So if you don't like the core combat, like, you're going to hate the rest of the game. And I made, like, a video about that, like, 2 months before the game released, and was like, you know, set your expectations accordingly. This is not like Destiny. Destiny has a bunch of different activities. This is like third-person Diablo. Like, if you like the combat system, the combo system, the flight system, and the 4 javelins, and you like the world, you probably have a good time with it. And that's kind of where I was at. Like, I really love the game, but I can also acknowledge, like, you know, it doesn't have much diversity, doesn't have much variety. But I think that's the problem, is a lot of people went into it, and they're like, well, what do I have to do? And I'm like, well, did you make, like, a badass Colossus build? And they're like, no. Well, I'm like, well, then you just, you know, you didn't experience the game because you didn't like it, which is fine, but, like, that's what it is right now. Like, that's the game, you know? And, I mean, obviously there's expectations based on it being just like Fallout 76, you know? Even if Fallout 76 was really good, let's say it was a super polished survival game, it probably would have gotten a bunch of praise, kind of like Respawn doing Apex Legends, you know, as a battle royale. Like, that game blew up because it's really good. But there still would have been that group of people who are like, you didn't make Titanfall 3, you didn't make Fallout 5, you didn't make, you know, the Anthem Mass Effect Edition, you know, like, so those expectations will always be there, but there's no denying that Anthem's also, like, just a game that was very troubled development, and we've known that for a while, too. I mean, there was a point in the development where they kind of rebooted. You know, it spent like 2.5 or more years in just pre-production, another like 4 in development. You know, people left the studio, people rejoined the studio. And I'm not saying it's not like talented devs working there, but, you know, it's like a team, like a group of people who are really good at working together. You break them up and you try and fill in someone new. It's going to either take a really long time to recover from that, or you're never going to recover at all.
It's like removing a limb.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like you can replace it with a prosthetic, but it's going to take a long time for you to get comfortable with that, and you might not even ever get back to the point where you were previously. Yeah, and you know, there was a bunch of devs who talked. A couple of the guys who were at Ubisoft just recently were like, were talking about the situation with Anthem, and they were like, you know, the one thing I learned in my time as a dev is that you never break up a great team if possible. Just because of how hard it is to get like a group of people like that together, you know. And so I think, yeah, Anthem clearly went through a lot of those issues. I mean, you see bits of the game that we saw like, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, and they're like there, but they're not featured anymore. Like a bunch of players got inside of the Strider accidentally during like a loading screen, and the whole Strider's like fleshed out, and you can like access your loot and your crafting table from there. And I was like, well, yeah, I probably just got pulled, man. Like, I can only imagine, you know, like how many times the game was like, what are we doing? I also think games like that are like, they're really ambitious. You know, a game like like people don't realize it, but a game like The Division and a game like Destiny, like they suck at launch a lot of the time, or they're lacking content because it's really hard to make a game like that. It's really hard to make a game like Fallout 76, like this massive AAA survival game where you've actually got like more than 3 pixels on every building you walk into, you know?
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably why Apex Legends has done quite so well as well, because it's very, very simple. You've got one map, you've got a small selection of heroes, a fairly limited number of weapons attachments and all of that stuff, and it's just go there, shoot other stuff, ring. It's not really doing anything that ambitious, it's just doing what it does really well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a small pool of ideas that you can just keep building on and making really, really, really good, without having to worry about all the complexities of how do we balance the currency system across multiple players, and how do we get players to interact with one another, and how do we keep players playing, and how do we, you know, balance loot, and like, it's just this endless. I can't imagine what it's like to make a game. I can't imagine what it's been like to work at Bungie for the last like 8 years now, to like build Destiny and have to deal with balancing not just PvE but PvP. You know, all of the community wants, when you've got a community that is constantly split down the middle, like that game's always 50-50 for what people want. And, you know, to just like have to make a decision at some point. So I totally get why Anthem went through all the struggles it went through, and I'm sure EA hasn't helped at all. I mean, there was way back in October when Battlefield 5 released. It was 2 months before that Anthem got delayed. It was supposed to release alongside of Battlefield 5. And so good old, I forget his first name, but the Wilson guy from, he's like the CFO or CEO of Activision, or of EA. He comes out and makes like this public announcement in response to a post from Kotaku that Jason Schreier made, basically saying that he learned the game was delayed because it was having trouble in development and it was rebooted. And this guy comes out and he's like, no, it's fine. We could have released it today if we wanted to alongside of Battlefield 5, but we didn't. And then the game comes out and it clearly needed another year of development, and it's like, what an a-hole. So I'm like,
so he basically set that up to maybe release it sooner than it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, they probably would have pushed it out, you know. They don't care. And I've seen some other devs comment on like what EA might have, like their idea with like Apex and Anthem, since they released so closely. And one of the devs was like, he was like, I think they thought Apex was gonna flop, so they're like, let's just make it free to play and blind release it, and then when that flops, everybody will look at Anthem like it's the next best thing. You know, because they really believed it was going to be like this great thing. And I really do believe there's that much of a detachment from like the people who make those big decisions to the people who,
I think there is too.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, I know it's not always like that. Sometimes the developer gets to make all the choices. Like with Respawn, they've made like every single decision behind Apex. They chose the release date. They were able to choose, you know, how they handled their microtransactions. And it was the same case with Titanfall 2. A lot of people think Titanfall 2 was shoehorned between Battlefield 5 and Call of Duty, but Respawn made that choice. you know? Like, so yeah, I think the game that is there now, I think Anthem's like got a really good potential, because I like a lot of it, and I like games like Diablo. Like when Diablo revamped its loot and, you know, got rid of the auction house, I played it for like another 1,000 hours or something stupid. You know, like if a game has a good core, I'll play it forever, as long as it can continue to build and grow. And Anthem's already had like 6 hot fixes, 2 substantial patches. They just released one last night that overhauled the inscriptions for loot. That made a huge difference. And as long as they can, like, I guess, just keep improving that, people can maybe start to see the game that's actually there without having to deal with like all of the frustrating bugs, you know, and weird design decisions that have been.
I wanted to ask about what the loot upgrade, like for us laymen, what did the loot upgrade entail? Because the most I learned about it was the various teaser trailers, a little bit of detail on like what the gameplay was like, some gameplay footage, and then Angry Joe's review.
So the basic thing to know is that, like, if you get a masterwork item, a masterwork item has 4 inscriptions. Not every weapon has 4 inscriptions based on their rarity, but masterworks have 4, legendaries have 4. Those inscriptions are bonus stats, modifiers. Okay. Before the patch, they had a global pool of inscriptions for all of the items in the game. So the issue that you'd run into is that you would get a shotgun to drop. You get like a masterwork shotgun, like the one's called Papa Pump, right? And you could get 3 out of those 4 inscriptions on there could be for different weapons. So inscription 1 would be plus 25% for LMG ammo. Inscription 2 would be plus 13 damage to sniper rifles. Inscription 3 would be plus 15% to machine pistols. And it's like, not only do you probably not want an inscription stat at all for another weapon, but you were getting 3 different weapons on one weapon that wasn't the same, you know, like it made no sense because they had that global pool. Yeah. And to me, that just came across like that was just a gross oversight in development. Like, you know, like, because inscriptions have actually had issues since launch. They day 1 patch like fixed a bunch of bugs for inscriptions rolling with zeros. So I think that was like one of those leftover things. But the fix is that now weapons have unique pools. So an assault rifle will only ever get, if it rolls a weapon-based inscription stat, it will only ever be for an assault rifle. You still have a chance to get inscriptions for your javelin, but they're always universal. So it might be like plus 15% lightning damage. So you're like, oh, that's a perfect build for my lightning build for my storm, you know, etc.
That's good.
So it's, yeah, it makes sense now. It didn't make any sense
before. Well, it's good they figured that out.
No, it did.
Within the first month.
Yeah, I think that was one of those things where they're like, this was clearly always an issue, and like,
so, oops,
let's now fix it.
Your gun is powering other guns.
It's like there's a small part of the mind where you're like, oh, well, if I, you know, run a shotgun as my secondary, that'll work. But then you look at your other 2 inscriptions and they're for like light machine guns, and you're like, I can't run 3 weapons in this game. There's only 2. This doesn't make any sense. I got 3 wasted inscriptions.
That's funny.
So yeah, they fixed it, and I played last night and got like some loot drops that were instantly like way better. I was like, yeah, okay, this makes way more sense now, obviously.
That's good. I'm glad. Like, I looked at that and I had a little sigh of relief for Anthem, because me personally, like, I kept my eye on it, but I wasn't quite sold on it. And then like once I saw more of it, I was just like, yeah, it's not really my thing. But I'm glad that one of the core gameplay things got resolved, because it is a looter shooter, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, you know,
and getting those masterwork items sounds like a pretty important thing towards the end game side. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's in, you know, the game still has like, I like to use Twitter as like, I think there's a lot of rough gauges you can use for like whether or not a game is actually still has like a community. And I say this based on the experience of someone who has covered a lot of dead games, quote unquote. Like, I always seem to fall in love with games that no one gives a crap about. Like Lawbreakers, Radical Heights, like, there's just too many to go on. Titanfall 2 is a game. You know, they end up having these wicked small communities. And one thing you'll notice is on a social media front, you'll go on Twitter, and when they make a post, they'll get like 50 likes. You know, the interaction for their social community on social media is usually really poor. Like Titanfall 2, they could talk about, oh, you know, we decided to push out this map because all of you guys in the community screamed for it. And the guys at Respawn are awesome like that. You know, the few of us that play Titanfall 2, we'd all scream like, dude, you should make Glitch 24/7 this weekend. And the community manager would get back to us and be like, yeah, let's do that. And they'd run it. And that post would get like maybe 100 likes, you know? Not much. Now you look at Apex Legends, they post a post on Twitter about anything, and it's got like 10,000 likes in like an hour, you know?
Yeah.
And when you look at even Fallout 76, there's still people like sitting there like, dude, this game's so fun. I'm so glad you guys are fixing. I'm so glad the roadmap. Like, it still has this following, you know? Sea of Thieves is the same way. It
does.
And Anthem is very much the same way. I mean, just the individual devs that people follow in massive numbers. I'm like... Plus, the game is actually like one of the #1 selling games in the UK right now, which I know doesn't have that much to go up against. But that's still impressive that it topped the charts over games that somehow managed to be #1, like, you know, 8 months after release, like Red Dead Redemption and stuff, and God of War. So it's like, yeah, you know, there's a community there who sees good stuff. Even actually, I always forget his name, Travis. I'm gonna say Travis Clay, but that's probably not right. Anyway, he's the dude who was at Bethesda when they did the Loot 2.0 overhaul for Diablo 3. He's the guy who's like responsible for essentially helping save Diablo 3 and like actually giving people the loot they wanted so they could farm for perfect builds. He made a post on the Anthem subreddit and was like, I really like this game, but I think you guys are going through a lot of the same issues we went through with Diablo 3 with loot. And he left him like a 5-paragraph thing of like how they dealt with it and how he feels they could deal with it with Anthem. And I was like, so that's like really cool. I think that shows that there is something about this game. People aren't just playing it because they're all being paid, you know. I got my check yesterday. Like, they're playing it because there's some fun aspect to it, and seeing some guy like that come over and just be like, hey, you know, I totally get like the difficulty of this, and here's how maybe this will help you guys. And the day after that, you know, that combined with the community's kind of outcry, they did that patch for inscriptions, and so yeah, I think it's going in a good path, all things considered.
Yeah. So is that about it with the Anthem thing?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for another hour, so we won't.
I know you won't. Like, I know for a fact, because you pride yourself in the videos you make about it. For anybody who's watching and wants to see more and listen to more, you should check out Tony Mo's channel. It's linked down below because he covers Anthem all the time.
Plenty of good ramblings over there.
Did we talk about the Fallout Amazon teaser at all? I can't remember if it was before.
We haven't properly mentioned it yet. Deserves a proper explanation of what it might be.
Yeah. Okay. So the short of it is there was a pre-listing for Xbox, PS4, and PC, right? For something from Bethesda with a countdown style in Fallout, or I can't even do words. Well, the countdown in this style of the Fallout countdowns we've seen in previous Fallout trailers, and that's about it.
It got pulled like instantly too.
I think there were $60 listings or a $70 listing. They were around that price range, so full price AAA game type listings. They were up for a portion of time, and now they're not. But people are saying that, oh, it might be a remaster of Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 4. I don't know.
I think my two best guesses, like I'll play the dark, angry side of it, is that it's going to be like a Fallout 76, like, you know, whatever. You know how the game's all like a couple months after launch, it's so popular for a game, especially when it gets a bunch of DLC, to just do like a re-release. Like, imagine if they did like the Fallout 76 Wild Appalachia edition, and it was like $70 or $60, and it was the base game with a bunch of like premium currency.
I'd be upset.
Yeah, that's the dark side of my mind. The positive side is it's a Fallout 3 like a remake in the current creation engine. I feel like New Vegas is completely out of the question, just because I think there's still some like sort of political stuff between them and Obsidian. Like, I don't know if they can even actually re-release anything.
I don't think they would be able to.
New Vegas release. Yeah, I think there's still some weird contracting stuff going on, especially because ZeniMax and like Bethesda have like changed in that time period since then, right? As well. So yeah, that's my best guess, is the Fallout 3 thing.
Yeah, I don't know. What if? Now here's a weird tinfoil hat situation. What if they decided to re-release 1, 2, and Tactics as like a full?
I saw some people saying that. That's like
a full digital.
I think
release.
I saw a dev talk about the original Deus Ex, right? And he was like, I would love a Deus Ex Resident Evil 2 style remake, but it would probably be impossible. Like, it would be so outrageously expensive because those old games have so many layers, you know? Like, you look at Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, and they're crazy, ridiculously deep games. And it's like, I mean, even Wasteland, you know, look at Wasteland 2 recently. Like, I just can't imagine making like a full 3D version of those games. And everybody always wants that because people don't like you know, top-down anymore, isometric.
Yeah.
But isometric is cheap, it's affordable, you know, like there's no like massively expensive 3D animations and like the modeling and stuff. I just don't know, like how much would it, I feel like it would be insanely expensive to remake 1 or 2 even though I would adore to play Fallout 1 and 2. And
I should mention that too, since you mentioned it. Wasteland 2, there is so much there. There is so much there if you give it a chance to like play and at least read a little bit, you will get hooked. But that's also something that turns people off. It's not just the isometric part, but the extra dialogue part.
Yeah, I mean where
it's not.
They're like when everybody complains about like modern Fallout, I'm just like, well, why don't you just play Wasteland 2?
Yeah,
you know.
I usually mention that too, and they're like, I don't like the camera angle. I'm like, what do you want?
It's that impossible expectation we talk about, right? Where people want games to be unbelievably deep, but they don't realize that like just because technology is advanced doesn't mean that that devs all of a sudden have more arms and they're also robots who can make 1,000 lines of code in 3 seconds flat. Like, you know, you can't like they just don't come together that well, which is why we get like these bite-sized experiences like Deus Ex Human Revolution, which is a good game. Is it as deep as the original Deus Ex? No, it's impossible for it to be. Like, there's nobody's willing to throw $10 billion at a game development project. Not to mention the logistics of it.
I mean, we could use like Fallout 3 dialogue as an example with a cross of Wasteland 2. In Wasteland 2, you have certain characters that have dialogue, but there's still images of the characters, and you have, of course, the overhead view of those characters. The character models are not the best. They're not, Yeah,
I mean, they're not like, super high poly, crazy 3D.
That's what I was looking for. High poly.
They get the job done,
Yeah, but you have these incredible stories that they spin by just explaining things to you, or the world itself describing what you see, as opposed to in Fallout 3, you're in first person. You're seeing these people talk to you verbally, and people have to do those voice lines. You have to see, like, if they're talking about that rock over there, you have to go like actually see that rock. It's not being described to you at all. And sometimes, in some cases, when things are described in text, that can actually become something more like in your own mind than what you're actually seeing in the game. And I think that's kind of what people want, but they're not prepared to go back and see those things that way.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I think most people want the like experience laid out before them, without like having to use any of their imagination.
Because it relied on a lot of your imagination in CRPGs, but a lot of people are just like, nah.
I think the easiest comparison would probably be like books to movies. You tell someone, let's watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That's easy. Everyone's down for that. You say to someone, let's read the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There'll be a few people up for that, and it's got so much more in it, but you're not going to do it. It's just paper, on constant paper for days on end. Just watch the movies instead.
I think that's a better example. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah,
and that gave us that little books and movies side subject too.
And speaking of, that reminds me of Fallout Shelter, actually, which you guys have on the list for the Fallout for the side games. Is like,
we haven't gotten to that yet.
I think
segue time.
I think
should we get to that?
Well, just to mention what you were saying, Sarge, with what people, I feel like that's kind of just built into our society now too, like, right, like how much time certain people are willing to spend on certain things and the ways they choose to absorb things. And like, Fallout Shelter is one of those instances where it's like, it's perfect for the type of person who, like, some people just love like that bite-sized, like, quick dose of like enjoyment, whereas for me with video games, it's always been like, Fallout Shelter could be really cool, but like if I sit down for a game, I want to sit down and invest in it. And enough personally where it's like, I like a game like Wasteland 2 because I feel like, you can't really get that sort of experience in most like big AAA games. I think that's the other thing too, is people miss out when they're not willing to try something like Wasteland 2. Plus it's just a bunch of the other great isometric RPGs that have been out over the years. I mean, look at all the Pillars of Eternity games, Divinity. Like, those games are just incredibly like atmospheric and moody, and just to do so many things that like modern RPGs just could never do, as long as you're willing to like put that extra bit of effort into them.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, if we kind of wanted to go on from that, we could move on to the Fallout topic type stuff, since we already kind of talked about.
Yeah, we've edged around it. Should probably delve into what all of the actual spin-offs actually are, if we're going to mention them.
We're an hour in.
Yep.
Okay, so on to the talk about how the spin-off Fallout games have changed over time and kind of changed the dynamic of the whole franchise over time, and what we've personally gravitated to. I read almost word for word what I wrote there, but
yep,
that's cool. So we're going on the timeline of like from earliest to latest. So 76 being the latest, Fallout Tactics being the earliest, and this is all spin-off games, mind you, not the mainline games. So not many people played Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel. That's the full title. It can be confused with Brotherhood of Steel, but it is not.
So easily confused. They're both next to each other in my Steam library, and I'm never sure which one's which. And you don't want to click the wrong one, you really don't.
Well, you don't have to worry about it too much, because Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is a console exclusive. So that's away from you, I hope. Anyway, Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel, that was developed by Micro Forte, so that was the only, I think that was the only Fallout game those guys developed. And it was published by 14 Degrees East, so this was a mega spin-off. Like, not even Interplay. Like, probably licensed by Interplay, but that's about it. And Bethesda distributed it digitally once it was available on, like, Steam and stuff like that. So the very simple plot is you play as a tribal recruited into the Midwest Brotherhood of Steel to help them expand in a post-war Chicago area. Eventually, you're dispatched to find what happened to the others of your group who crash-landed, finding both super mutants and another rising threat, robots. I think I explained that pretty well. Basically, this version, or this, I guess, branch of the Brotherhood of Steel went over the mountains east because their ideals didn't really match up. They wanted to recruit more members because they saw themselves kind of stagnating. And in order to do that, they were just like, let's recruit tribals. They're everywhere. I mean, they may be savages, but they also know how to fight. Like, you know, they could help if they have brains. So so they went over the mountains in giant zeppelins, which probably inspired the Brotherhood in Fallout 4 to have a big balloon, a big war balloon, and they crash landed, and then they're basically stuck in the Chicago area. Have you guys played it at all? Did you?
No.
Fallout Tactics.
Oh yeah.
Got mixed up. Yeah.
No,
but
that's not one that I've ever. I think I own it, and I maybe booted it up once, but most of my experience with it comes from just talking to you about it.
Yeah. So what? It's much more of a mission-based type game. So imagine the strategy layer of, imagine like XCOM.
Yeah.
Like any of the newer XCOM games, like it's just the missions basically, and then maybe a little bit of base management. That's kind of how Fallout Tactics worked. You had a very little amount of, plot and what the objective was, and then boom, you're right into the action. But in the weird thing was, even though this was an isometric game, kind of in that same format, you could do it in turn-based, or you could do it in real time, kind of like a real-time strategy, which made it very unique in basically all the other games, where you could just point and click and be like, oh, auto fire if you run into somebody, and then just tell them to move. And then they would, automatically fire. And you could also go prone with your dudes, and I think this is the only game that you could do that. Is like lay on the ground and like crawl.
Yeah, that actually is missing from Fallout, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've never even thought about that till now. Why can't I lie down?
Yeah, that was one of the things too. Like they all had like sneak animations, like crouched, and then they had prone animations. There was a lot of extra effort put in with a lot of the extra mechanics that they had. But on top of that layer, they also had vehicles that you could use in combat and drive around on the map. I had many occasions where I would be in a random encounter with my 2 or 3 vehicles, and just leave my dudes in them and just run over whoever was opposing me. or use the gunner seat and the windows to just drive around them as I shot them. It was very fun, and this is the only Fallout game where you have full control of your vehicles too, because you don't even not really in Fallout 2. Fallout 2 you get the highwayman, but it's only like a faster map travel and storage bin. Like that's that's really all it is.
Yeah.
So there was that. I don't know. Did you want to talk about Fallout Brotherhood of Steel? The other one?
Oh, you mean the best Fallout game ever made?
Yes.
Sure.
The 100% best Fallout game ever made needs Game of the Year edition. That's what was being teased.
Yeah, well, I of course have never played this game because it is far too good for me. However, I've watched Caedo's Let's Play of it, which is great, by the way. You should definitely subject yourself to watching all of it. But it was developed and published by Interplay, the people who did the original Fallouts. And you play as one of 3 mercenaries recruited by the Brotherhood of Steel, and unlike normal Brotherhood, you can be a ghoul, because, you know, the Brotherhood are down with that.
Yeah.
And you need to find lost Brotherhood members in Texas. Later on, you find out that they were on the trail of a new mutant threat, and you're sent to stop it. Which, isn't that Fallout 1? I swear that's Fallout 1. Yeah,
it's a pretty good. It's a pretty recycled premise. It's kind of both combined. It's like you're a recruit for the Brotherhood. Oh yeah, you got to fight mutants.
So this is the reason everyone wants Interplay to be developing Fallout, and they miss what the old company did right. This is exactly it.
Yeah, this is the weird thing, because that was towards the end of Interplay's life, where they had gotten a new CEO who had no idea what people wanted in a game, and they were slowly, going bankrupt due to some sort of mismanagement going on. And the former CEO and other members were very much aware of that and kind of went their own ways. And kind of just let it die, I think. And then the rights to Fallout 3 got transferred over to the Bethesda, and then later the entire franchise. And that little sweet moment where the whole franchise was being transferred, it was like free on GOG. Anyway, that was cool. So I got my copies for free.
That's good.
And I ended up buying them again on Steam because I wanted to put my guides up on Steam. But yeah, roommate Kite and myself played through Fallout Brotherhood of Steel co-op. It is the only, unless you count Fallout 76, it is the only co-op Fallout game that you can actually play on the couch next to your friend.
Yep.
One controller each. It wasn't split screen. It was all like you had to be both on the same screen. Kind of like it's a dungeon crawler game. Man, I'm having a hard time explaining this garbage fire. Some people use it as a defense for like saying how bad 76 was. You don't know how bad a Fallout game can be. Like, I'm telling you that right now. You don't know.
I like the fact Fallout Brotherhood of Steel exists, because when I get people commenting now going like, oh, Fallout 76 is going to ruin the franchise, this will be the death of it, I just go, I feel like it'll probably survive. We've been through worse, believe it or not, and it's come out better in the end.
Yeah, this was a very edgy type Fallout game where the developers, I don't know what they were doing. I saw a lot of their the concept art looked like somebody in high school drew it. Like I don't want to bash the artists, but a lot of the art that was finished were a lot of the female characters scantily clad, and I was just like, why? Also the first two females you encounter in the game are wearing barely anything. Balls Guarana was their product placement. There's product placement in the game for Balls Guarana. The soundtrack consisted of a lot of metal bands, not 40s and 50s jazz or blues.
I think that Brotherhood of Steel, not the good one. It's a really good example of a game made purpose built by publishers for that era, because if you look at gaming for the longest time, it's not that there aren't women who play games, and it's not that there aren't women who have worked in game dev.
Right.
Some of the first video games in Atari were made by women who never got credit for it. Is that they marketed it all towards guys, and that was that whole generation. You look at the magazines back then, and it was all energy drinks and metal music and half-naked women to sell like every game you could ever think of. And I think that was really like that last push by like Interplay as like as a publisher front, and maybe infected by some other things at that point, to just like make this absolute pile of garbage. Like that's like one of the few games I'm not afraid to just bash, because I feel like people like say, oh, the developers have no passion or no love. I'm like, that's not the case with like 99.9% of games. But Brotherhood of Steel, I'm pretty sure was like purpose built just to cause everything to burn around it. Like like somebody just walking out of the office that day and just, you know, pouring gasoline all over it and lighting a match and saying, there you go. Like,
yeah, it's like the kids are like this, right? They like Fallout. Let's just stick the Fallout name on
Everyone's
it. That's
super edgy.
More of what it felt like.
So bad.
The first act of the game, or the first chapter, is not too bad if you look at it from just like a pick up and play type arcade type game, like Gauntlet. Like, you just pick up and play it. Like, you're not really paying attention to the plot. You just want something to play with your friend, kind of thing. But if you're playing it for some sort of deeper connection with the story, as it progresses, you start to loathe playing it more and more as you go, because you start noticing some things, either in the characters, in the story that's being told, a little bit of inconsistencies with the established lore. Not just a little bit. The motivations, by the end, you find out the motivations of the super mutants are just to stop being sterile. So you're actually kind of the bad guy. The raider chick at the beginning is like an informant for the Brotherhood, and you end up killing her anyway because she's just a butt. And if that kind of Brotherhood is the one you're dealing with, like, why are you friends with them to begin with? Like, it all becomes like really obscure. Also, Deathclaws, I don't know what happened.
They look beautiful.
I don't know what happened. Design for the levels and the even the bosses become very samey, and by the numbers towards the end. Basically all the bosses by the end become bullet sponges. It's and there's wildly spiking damage. So sometimes you could be doing just fine and then something comes by and one-shots you. It's neat.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many games where you're just like, don't even ever bother, but that's one of them.
Yeah,
especially,
and that's why we played
especially in 2019, where it's like,
yeah,
listen, let me give you a list of about 5,000 other games you could play before you play this one.
I implore anybody who's listening, like, if you're really, really interested, I did a highlights recently of all the best/worst moments of that series, because it was about a year ago, but I finally, put the highlight reel together. It's like 20-something minutes of highlights, the all 30 episodes. If you want an idea of how bad it can be, you could just watch that.
Yeah, that's a good way.
If you're really invested, I have the entire series on my channel still, so have at it.
That's probably the better way to experience the game, is just to have your 20 minutes with it and then just wash your hands of it forever.
Yeah. If you really are a masochist and want to put your friend through the torture because you shouldn't do it by yourself, it's for PS2 and Xbox, the original Xbox.
Make sure you buy him like a whole pizza beforehand.
Yeah,
thank you.
Do something nice. Do something nice for your friend who you're going to torture later.
On the subject of Fallout 76, if you really want a game that insults you and that feels like a waste of your money, you should play Brotherhood of Steel.
Yeah, absolutely. With no hope of having updates.
It's never going to get better.
Yeah. Because there was a plan for Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2 if this one was actually successful, but even the rights for the Snowblind, or not the Snowblind engine, what was the engine they used? The engine they used, which was also used for Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, which was the dungeon crawler, the dungeon crawler of the Baldur's Gate series. The same engine was used for Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, but just not used to the best of their ability.
We could talk about a good Fallout game now.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the best, the most well-loved. I would I would venture to say.
Yeah, I think
Fallout New
rightfully
Vegas.
so too. I think a lot of times when you have like a trilogy, people like latch on to one film or one game and like they praise it beyond belief just because, because the times have changed. But I think like mechanically and from a lot of different perspectives, New Vegas is probably one of the best. It's the best 3D Fallout game, I'll say, because I think Fallout 1 and 2 are kind of in a class of their own. But
yeah, they are. Definitely. Okay. Well, Tony, did you want to go over this one since you have experience with this one?
Man, where do you start with New Vegas? It's like, I think you could get really crazy and talk about like the story. There's always people who like to break down like the crazy in the story, but I think the thing I like about New Vegas is like the overarching premise of it compared to the other Fallout games is that it kind of does like what I was saying earlier, like that 76 needs to do, which is to just focus on like the individual. I mean, and at the end of the day, New Vegas is literally just a story about a courier who gets shot in the head because he was carrying a certain item. Like, your role in the world is really no more significant than that, like, initially.
Yeah.
You're not some, like, crazy god, you're not destined to save the world, and then you just kind of can get led down all these crazy paths, and it feels like watching, like, a really good TV show, where it's just kind of, like, each week, each episode features, like, a new, like, character with, like, their own interesting arc, and you just kind of get to see that from the perspective of, like, the main characters, who maybe aren't hyper interesting, but they're like kind of like comfort food every time you watch them. And that's kind of how I feel about being the courier. It's just like one little adventure after the next, and every character you meet kind of like helps elevate your like knowledge of like that version of the wasteland. And it just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and it can get really crazy depending on the rabbit holes you decide to go down in New Vegas, which I think is another one of its big strengths, is that like you can finish the game, and within the last hour leading up to whatever ending you might get, you suddenly learn of like 20 other endings. Like the game just perfectly like is like, hey, this is the last hour of the game. Oh, by the way, there's about 30 other endings you could have got. Have fun replaying the game a dozen times. Like,
yep.
So it's a mechanically janky game for sure. I think I think this is one of those examples of a game like maybe it couldn't have even existed without being as janky as it is. But I just think it's also, it reminds me, I like to use Mass Effect 1 is like that, is like my go-to reference for janky games, because like I didn't play Mass Effect 1 initially because all I heard about it was how like buggy and like janky and broken it was at times. But then a friend was like, you should do it because I think you'll like still love it. And that was like the first time I think in my life. I was pretty young at that point. I think I was like 12. I don't even know. It's a long time ago. And I think that was the first time in my life where I tried something like knowing that there were going to be frustrations, but I didn't really care. And that's like New Vegas in a nutshell, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, now people mod it, but even without mods, like it's broken, but you just don't care because it's so good everywhere else.
Yeah. There was a time people bring it up every so often too. The launch of it was pretty rough.
Yep.
And not enough people remember that part. that the launch itself was pretty rough and needed some patching like right off the bat. Yeah. I can't remember what it all entailed. I know it was bugs, obviously.
There was also the fact that for once a Fallout game was literally unplayable in some cases, where people literally they tried to boot up the game and it basically went da 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 da, and then Fallout New Vegas has stopped working.
Yeah, it was like the Skyrim before Skyrim.
Yeah.
People got to like quest lines that were broken. There were certain paths, like basically people told you just like don't do them because your game will lock up forever. Save glitches that caused people to lose 20 plus hours of progress, more than that. Yeah, man. I mean, there were reviews for the game at the time that were like, they were incomplete. Some people actually reviewed the game and just gave it like a 3, I think, because it was so broken. And like, it was definitely like one of the first, I feel like one of the first games I remember genuinely having that bad of a launch, moving into an era where they could make improvements, but it was going to take a while. And where reviewers were at the point of like, just because your game like is broken doesn't mean we're gonna like give it a break and wait for the bugs. We're just gonna review it anyway. I mean, rightfully so.
Yeah. and this took 2 years. This was only 2 years of development, by the way, because Bethesda Studios was working on Skyrim, right? Yep. So they said, hey, Obsidian, why don't you make a Fallout game? you're some of you are former Interplay employees, you have the property again to work with. What, have fun. And they did. Like, they added some stuff that was supposed to be in Van Buren even, which was meant to be Fallout 3, which I thought was pretty awesome. But this, in spite of the time that they took to, or the time they had to make it, and despite the bugs, they even were able to create 4 memorable DLCs, like all 4 of them that all tied together to the Courier's main story. Like, I don't think I've experienced DLC on that level, or expansions on that level, with any other game besides Fallout New Vegas, where the vanilla game is just fine on its own. Like, it is its own contained story, like you're content with the ending. But after seeing all of that added on and like chaining together was incredible.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that was like a mini golden age for Bethesda, because Fallout 3 I always felt had really good expansions. Well, like, I played through like all of them and enjoyed them. They weren't as good or as on the level of New Vegas, but they were solid. And I feel like yeah, I agree that we haven't really, I mean, honestly, like, we were just talking about The Witcher 3 earlier. That's probably the first game since New Vegas that has had like a slew of expansions, not just like DLCs, but like genuine story expansions and gameplay expansions that actually I was actually interested in. I feel like most of the games these days, and maybe this is just the reason we don't like see story DLC anymore, like, I just don't care, you know. It's like, I was there. Even like Spider-Man, like, I loved the new Spider-Man, but they like did a bunch of story DLCs, and I'm like, dude, there's so much other stuff to play. I mean, back then it was like,
I skipped it.
Yeah, it was a treat, because you were like, well, I'm not playing anything else, I might as well play more New Vegas.
That was only like a month ago. Like, I finished Spider-Man and I was like, oh look, DLC. I'll wait for the sequel.
Yeah. Still gotta finish Horizon Zero Dawn's DLCs. Actually, that's a game that like the DLC is supposed to be amazing for, but it's like a time constraint thing, I guess, too, at this point.
I think the only ones I actually went through on that, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sarge, because you talk to me a lot more often, was Moon Crash. It was a Moon Crash DLC / expansion / chaos mode that came for Prey, and I played the crap out of it. I played like all the storylines of each character, and that was awesome.
Yeah, Moon Crash was
like,
dope, man.
Yeah, and that was a completely like different like shift.
I love stuff like that too, man. I love when a dev just says like, I mean, we could continue the story, but like, honestly, we spent like 5 years on that. Why don't we just make something cool and different for our game? And like, so few games do that, but I feel like when that does happen, it's usually really good. And like, Moon Crash was totally an example of that. I'm trying to think of other games that have done that, but I mean, well, I guess Witcher 3 was like that. Like, you know, Blood and Wine, and those are like, Blood and Wine takes you to a whole new place. Like, Toussaint is super cool, you know, kind of different color palette, different vibe, gives you like your own little vineyard and stuff to own. Like, it's still The Witcher 3, but it definitely feels like it went a little bit differently, at least. I mean, Moon Crash is way different, but
the dark fantasy character stories, nursery rhyme stories, even, like, yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah, good job with that. I guess back onto New Vegas quickly. I feel like it's the most mechanically deep of like any of the like big RPGs we've gotten, at least like shooter focused RPGs. I feel like that's kind of an entire genre that doesn't really get that much exploration, and I wish it did, like RPGs with guns and stuff, which is why I'm excited for the Outer Worlds, but also for the game that is totally slipping my mind right now.
Yeah,
you guys know that game being made by the Russian dev? Looks super crazy. It's been getting a little bit of attention. Oh man, God, I can't remember it. It's kind of like a Bioshocky. No. It's like a Bioshocky Deus Ex vibe. Super weird, bizarre.
Oh, Atomic Heart.
Yes, Atomic Heart. Actually, so I used to spend a lot of time on Steam just browsing the upcoming releases section. Like, if you go to page 12, you start to get stuff that is for some reason on Steam, even though it's not going to release for like 5 years. And that was on there, and I remember watching the trailer for it and being like, this looks insane. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And I was like gonna make a video on it. I never did. And then literally like 3 weeks later, they push out like the official trailer for it, and everybody's talking about it. I'm like, this still looks insane. But yeah, like that kind of like creepy, like, I don't know, not creepy, but like that sort of like heavy RPG, like FPS aspect. Like, that's the one thing I do think that I'm glad like Bethesda got a chance to do that with Fallout 3. Because I just don't think we have a lot of games like that, and I'm glad that like the Outer Worlds is going to exist now. because I want more. Like, I love the idea of games like that, and I just want more stuff to be not fantasy that's also an RPG. I feel like every time we get a really good RPG, it's swords and shields and magic, which is great, but we've got a lot of those already.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned to you, I mentioned to somebody that Skyrim fatigue is like real.
Oh yes, we've
so
spoken
real
about that many times.
But it extends past like Skyrim. It extends into that realm of like fantasy, you know, sword wielding / magic wielding type games. Like, I have less interest in them simply because of how much time I've spent with Skyrim and Elder Scrolls games.
Yeah, they're not. They also are like. I mean, they're like. It's like shooters have the same problem, right? Too, like mainstream shooters, not like RPG hybrid shooters, but they get caught up in like they're caught up like in the military thing because every 14-year-old kid has learned what a SCAR and an AUG is, and I can't stand it because I don't need real world firearms. Like, I want like crazy fun stuff, you know. It's the same thing with first person shooters. When I play a game, like, I adore what Respawn does because they're like, yeah, they're kind of, but not really, because we also have this gun called the L-Star, and it's got like a little heat sink coil in it, and it fires projectile based plasma rounds. You know, they're like, they just do all this crazy cool stuff, and that's kind of how I feel about the fantasy stuff. Is like everything is like way too set in the same sort of magic and like wizardry we've experienced, you know, for the last 20-30 plus years now, going back to like pen and paper, and it all just kind of feels like it gels into one now. There's like slightly different twists on it, but not that much.
Well, it feels like everything has to be built around either D&D or Tolkien, and if it variates from that, people don't like it. I still to this day get comments on like character builds I've made which just go against the norm slightly. I'll just make something which differs from fantasy. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll make this character stand out by making them different to the established rules, and people just lose their minds over it. They're like, why is it different? This is how fantasy goes, and it feels like everything is just set in stone.
Yeah.
Which makes every game you play feel like, oh yeah, we're just ticking off stuff.
It's interesting too, because when you look at people who really play pen and paper, they're constantly making their own rule sets to break free of those, like, you know, of those boundaries that have been set over the years. But like the people who don't are just like, no, that's how I saw it in D&D once. What do you mean you've got a mage who also uses, you know, a bow and arrow? Like you mean he's gonna use magic arrows? Blasphemy! like you know, the littlest, like you said, the littlest bit of it, but
he's in some sort of cult. They die off quickly.
And it's like, I know it's hard to sit here and just be like, be more original, but I'm not really saying that because I know there's nothing like truly original. I just feel like in general, like all of the genres we have fallen into like these positions of like there's just too many norms set. Like one thing that I've always said when we talk about like characters, I mean, not only have video games been struggling with diversity for like forever, but I feel like we always just play humans on top of that. Not only are we like not playing diverse humans, we're just not playing diverse characters. It's like, let me have a story where I play a freaking orc, and not because I like rolled that character in Skyrim, but because it's actually the story of an orc and like his actual life, and like let me have character dialogue and story development based around the life of an orc, not the human who befriended the orc or the human who like got cast out of his castle for the 1000th time, you know. Like,
if I could do a game plug here, Deep Rock Galactic should still be free on Steam right now for the free weekend.
You should also just buy that game.
Speaking
of, incredible.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. You play as space dwarves. You're mining and stuff. You've probably seen me stream it if you watch my streams. Fun co-op experience with people. Check it out.
Yeah, that game is so good, man. And speaking of that, I think I actually, when I started playing Deep Rock, when it launched in early access, I had like this exact conversation with friends. I'm like, why are we always humans? You know, like, let me play this character, let me play that character. That was actually my biggest problem with everybody was super into Kingdom Come when it came out, and I'm just like, that sounds like I'm sorry, but it sounds like literally the most boring thing in the world to me. A realistic simulation style RPG where you play a human.
Yep.
And then I played it and I was like, it's exactly that. This guy's drunk in the bar, poking at his girlfriend who works there. Like, what am I doing? You know, like, this is so dull. If I want to play, like,
I'm just living another life.
Yeah, like if I want to play like a heavy sim thing like this, like, I'll just go play pen and paper and, you know, have way more fun with it. Like, Yeah, I burnt out.
I got torn apart by a few people for kind of negatively reviewing that game. And a lot of the part of my negative review was I had like two main functions, which was it makes it feel not just that it's trying to make you feel human, but almost an inept human. Like, you open doors slowly, everything's very, very slow paced, and you're kind of terrible at everything, which I didn't like. And the other part was, I said in my review, I've done this stuff in real life. I used to be a medieval reenactor. So for me, it was playing a video game that did a weird representation of stuff I did in real life for years. And it was just like, no. In real life, this stuff gets boring. It's not going to be fun sat at a computer doing it.
Yeah, and it's like, and I get there's a place for, simulation style stuff. I'm not saying we should never have anything like that, but I just think it falls in line with what we were saying. Like, I think for a lot of people, there's fatigue of like, we've done this, and just because you tried to make it like all super, like simulation based and slow, and sword fighting's hard, and you die quick, and yada yada, doesn't make
maximum realism.
It doesn't make the rest of the story any less boring. Like, I would have been fine with like the the like realistic approach if I was a more interesting character with a more interesting backstory, actually being played out. I mean, that is always the thing that kills me about RPGs in general, is that we always get to pick a character with a cool backstory, but the only like story we ever get to see played out is the one that follows along the traditional human path. And like, that's so Skyrim and Oblivion. Like, I'm a night elf, but somehow I'm just caught up in what are boring ass human affairs. Like,
yep.
Like, dude, I literally came from like the woods. I've got this crazy background of like hatred and interspecies racism between my people, and then I'm just like worried about some humans and their bullshit. It's so weird, Yeah, we need some news stories.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Fallout Shelters doesn't give us any of those
solutions. I was gonna say we diverged a little bit, but that was a little more than a little bit, which is okay. I'm glad we do. This is actually filling out the time for the PIPCAST pretty well. So on the continuing Fallout topic with our offshoot or spin-off Fallout games, we have two more to talk about. One of them's pretty obvious, but the other is Fallout Shelter, which was the mobile Fallout game that came out alongside the announcement and coverage of Fallout 4. And they were like, hey, you can play it tonight. It's free. And this is currently the only free Fallout game, free universally. Yeah. It's on mobile, it's on PlayStation, it's on Xbox, it's on PC. It's pretty much everywhere. Like, you can pick it up and play it. It's a vault management game. You play as the Overseer, you create your vault, you build it up, and you make sure all of your people, your vault dwellers, are happy, and go out on adventures and take in new residents if you feel like it. At least I think you're supposed to. If you want your vault to grow, you have to take in new people.
There's, I believe it's a 100 vault dweller limit, so you're trying to just like fill up the vault, make it as best as possible. And
get that new genetic material, make some more babies.
Order babies.
I only played like an hour. It's definitely, the management type games are definitely not my thing. And that's kind of the nature of all these spin-offs, is some of them are probably not going to be your thing, and that's okay. Yeah. Because that's the nature of a spin-off. They're specifically doing these things to see what sticks and what is like heavily disliked, or what people are not really into. And I think every developer, I mean, going off on another tangent, I think every developer needs to do that to know, or at least improve what they're doing in a way.
Yeah, if you just do the same thing over and over and over again, you're not going to get any fresh ideas, and it's just going to be stale after a while.
Yeah, and Bethesda experimented with things in Skyrim that they brought into an improved in Fallout 4, and it can be seen in games before that as well. And sometimes, they need to expand by, messing around in other games to see what works, to add it to future ones, or just say, forget it.
Yeah,
probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I think I mean, I guess we can shoehorn the number 5 into here, the Fallout 76 along with Fallout Shelter.
Yeah.
Like, I just hope at this point, like for Bethesda, like 76 and like the long break they're gonna have now between the next Elder Scrolls game, as well as what is the other product they're working on? The space one? Starfield. I hope that's enough of like a break for them to be able to, just on like all fronts, technically, mentally, and like creatively, like reset. You know, because like I want to see like kind of like a new golden age for them, right? Where like Starfield and like the next Elder Scrolls get to be like the RPGs that I feel Bethesda can make, because I think we also have reached a point where for like them, they spent so much time making like accessible RPGs that they like got like lost in it. You know, that's kind of how I felt about Fallout 4. Like I mean, they took, you know, Morrowind and Oblivion, and they just kept like leveling up like this experience that no one really ever had before, especially on console. Like people were either playing JRPGs or that was it. You played pen and paper, JRPG, maybe some CRPGs, but like no one was playing like a 3D, you know, role-playing game like Morrowind in like Oblivion. And so like I'll always like massively respect for them that, and I even adore like Skyrim and stuff. But I do feel like it got like so caught up in just making it like mainstream, you know, for one reason or another. And, and I'd love to see like Starfield and the next Elder Scrolls, like, yeah, I still want them to be like accessible and appeal to as many people as possible, but I hope Bethesda can like look at the success of games like Bloodborne and like Soulsborne games in general, and hopefully Sekiro coming out soon, and like realize that they can still do like the RPG things they used to be so good at, and like people will still play the games, you know? They don't have to like strip back so much of the experience, because I feel like a lot of like their world building DNA is still like incredible. Like they're amazing at making fun to explore worlds, you know? I mean, that's why I play Skyrim still, like, and just like spending time in the world, you know? And so, yeah, like you're saying about just, you know, the creative relief, and then the chance to just, you know, get some new creative experiences. Like 76 is going to be a big one for even if the game like flops in, you know, a year from now.
Yep.
Like building something like that is a completely new front for them, and like having to deal with all of the issues that come with it. Like, yeah, I've got high hopes for like Starfield and the next Elder Scrolls just based on that.
One of my biggest hopes, and a lot of people echo this, so forgive me for, you know, repeating what's already been said all the time, is the engine. Please. New engine.
Yeah, I think,
please.
Like I was saying, technically for them, it's there was an interview, actually Rami Ismail was on Drop Frames with like Con Carnage and it made GP in them, and he talked a lot about that because people were asking actually right around the time of Fallout 76, and you know, he was like the biggest technical like issue, not even technical issue, but the biggest issue with switching to a new engine, especially when you're trying to develop games, is like you have to reteach everybody, you know. So he's like, you know, a lot of engines are old. He's like, that's probably not the actual issue with the creation engine. He's like, it's just a technical front where now the engine essentially has so many like legacy bugs and so many legacy issues, and it's no longer as efficient as it once was. But it's also just as inefficient to like teach a whole new team how to use it, you know, a whole team how to use a whole new engine in the middle of development. So that's where he was like pointing to Starfield and the next Elder Scrolls as being like that big swap where they can take this opportunity to build up a new engine, teach the devs along the way. And yeah, I guess I wonder what a game, like what is a game like? You see devs all the time, and they build an engine from the ground up. Like Snowdrop was built for the first Division game. And that engine is supposed to be, every dev I've talked to who's worked with Snowdrop says it's like unbelievably good. Like the iteration for it, it's just so easy to work with. Which is why like the first Division game, it was lacking in content, but in every other aspect the game was like stunning, you know. And like from a technical front, it just works, and you could tell they could just do like anything they wanted to do with it. So hopefully that's like where they'll be at with whatever they do, you know, whatever the next engine is. And yeah, I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, it's just like hopefully they have the opportunity to make the best possible decision. Because I'm not going to pretend I know what the best possible decision is, and maybe it's not necessarily to make a whole new engine, but to do a full rebuild of, you know, what is the engine anymore? It's like a combination of the creation engine, and there's like only a few remnants of Gamebryo left, right? Yeah.
It's I don't know, it's a Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, I mean that's how most engines you find out. Like, you know, Respawn uses like a modified source engine, and
like it's many iterations, so many iterations in. But like you were saying, I guess you put it into words better than I could, because you were probably ready for that too. The legacy bugs you were talking about, those somebody brought up the inability to climb ladders.
Yeah.
That should not be a problem anymore. Should not be a problem since Fallout 3, and it still is. Like you have to have stairs.
No, there's just no ladders in.
No matter what.
As we were saying earlier as well, the going prone. That's likely, I imagine, down to the engine.
Yeah, or vehicles that were actually able to drive. Like even so, like riding around in a vertibird, that's one thing, but something that we're able to drive ourselves, still not functionally an idea in their mind, because probably limitations to the engine itself, which sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it would be...
that's one of the main things that everybody wanted. You see mods of it all the time, but they don't function great.
Yeah, the mods are probably a decent demonstration of how bad it would be if they did try and implement it. And
yeah,
I mean, and not, I guess in general too, they just don't even, you can tell it's just never on their table, because they don't build any of their worlds around really the usage of vehicles, apart from horses in in Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, like, there's like so few areas in Elder Scrolls where you see like other moving vehicles, whether they be like carts or horses. Like, it's such a rare occasion, it's not a common thing, like in Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, where that like entire game, you can tell, was built very heavily around having like moving groups of individuals and stuff like that. Which I'm not saying they have to do all of that, but like you're saying, it would just be nice to have like a little bit more of that actual like transportation element to the next Fallout game, to the next Elder Scrolls game.
Just some things not being as clunky, because I mean, rose-colored glasses are a thing we bring up. At least I bring up a lot. Seeing things like how we want them to be, not necessarily how they are, or things how we thought they were, but how they are. And I noticed some things about Fallout 4 that were specifically created for bringing in an audience, like for like trailer purposes and stuff like that. And they were left in the game, but they weren't expanded past that point. Like, I know the tutorial's like an easy go-to, because like that's just so many things thrown at you at once. With the Conquered thing, like the Death Claw showing up, you suddenly have power armor. Like, that's all spectacle. Like, that's not... They were thinking that first, instead of tutorial. That just happened. That's just how it happened. At least that's how I imagine it. And it's way too fast for a character, especially a character who's like traumatically like showing up after being frozen for 200 years, being like, oh, what happened? And then I'm in power armor, okay. Fighting a freaking dinosaur-looking beastie.
Well, it's giving you that initial power fantasy. I mean, Skyrim actually did it to a very lesser degree. When you first go through the cave in Helgen, there's the bear that you encounter. It's like, you gotta kill this bear, which is a really tough enemy, but the bear inside there, it's like, you gotta beat this thing because we made it a much lower level one and given you the equipment at the start, the perfect situation for this particular fight. And then Fallout 4, they just cranked it up to 1 million. Because why not?
Yeah, fight a death.
But one of the things I wanted to say, one of the things that I noticed is how much mocap do you guys remember in characters?
Like for 4? I don't even know how much they did, to be honest. Like, I mean, I know they did facial work, but I didn't. Did they even do any full body stuff?
They did. Okay. They did. But the reason I brought up the mocap stuff is due to the inconsistency in Fallout 4 that is pretty apparent after you play it so many times. Similarly to the inconsistency that happens in 76. Due to the world being so large, or focus being in the wrong places for too long. The mocap spots that I'm talking about are when you first meet Preston Garvey, there's some mocap there. It's pretty obvious. As well as the first encounter with Piper in front of Diamond City. She's moving around a lot. Yeah. And you don't see any other character do that. And that it's very infrequent after that point. You don't have much when it comes to when you interact with anybody in the Institute. It's just your standard animations for characters in dialogue, for the most part, as well as when you're hitting turning points in the game. I think Elder Maxon, when he's doing his intro speech, he does like that's just him pacing back and forth when he's doing his thing. But that glitched out for me a couple times actually, so like that's just proof on its own that it needed some extra time cooking.
Back to Tony's point though, without you having brought up that stuff, I wouldn't have really thought about it, because it doesn't need to have all the mocap, it just needs to tell the story. And if the story isn't good, you could have someone doing somersaults in mocap, it wouldn't suddenly make it great.
Yeah, that's why when people talk about like the voice actors in Oblivion and like in Skyrim and stuff like that, I'm just like, I just don't even care that the one guy sounds like the other guy because he is the same guy, you know, type deal. I guess that's like the one thing with like Bethesda games where I've always been just like, that never has bothered me, and I think it also leads to like what could be a way more expanded conversation on you know, like the amount of time that certain developers put in, like versus crunch. Like people always like to use The Witcher 3 as like that benchmark where they're like, oh, but they just did all of that stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but you also then found out that CD Projekt, like everybody at the studio worked like ridiculous hours, you know, like just this.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make it was consistency rather than like what details are left in or what details are there, I should say.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like if something's there, I expect it to be throughout the entire game, not just small portions of it.
Yeah, that tends to be how a lot of games handle mocap these days, unfortunately, because it's usually it's usually mocap, and then they hand tool the animations that, you know, obviously to make them in game so it looks more natural. Anthem did something similar. Mass Effect did something similar for a while too, where basically key scenes and any cutscenes are mocapped, and then the animator comes in and, you know, finishes them off. The lead animator will like do all the polish and stuff on them, but then all the other characters have like raw basic animation work, like you're saying. And yeah, I agree with a game like Fallout. For me, it's just like, don't even, you know, bother like about doing like super over the top. I just feel like there was a lot of work in Fallout 4 put into like the voice acting and like those character interactions, and they just added no value for me. You know, where I'm like, yeah, I would rather just have the consistency of good old Oblivion. Let me just talk to this guy face to face and just, you know, let him read out the text. Like the voice acting was always enough. Like Oblivion to me is like still legendary for that. Like every time I boot it up and do that first, you know, the first bit through the dungeon and talk to what's his name, to the king guy, I'm always just like, yeah, this just looks old, but I don't care. Like it just works, you know. It just gets the story across. It's like sitting at a table with your friends playing D&D. Like you don't need to have someone who's the best DM, who's literally a voice actor, to have a good time and have it be memorable. And I think, yeah, that's another big obsession point for a lot of games, right? Is like everything's got to be fully voiced and mocapped, and we got to have this cutscene that probably took the developers and the animators, you know, 3 weeks to make, and then it's just done and over within 10 seconds. And if it doesn't deliver the story well, you're just like, well, that sucked. You know, you don't even notice all the hard work that went into the animations. I agree. That's very much how I feel about Fallout 4 stuff. Like I didn't even notice it because I was just like not interested.
Yeah. And there was moments where like they were used for impact, but it actually had kind of the reverse effect.
It just made it weird and awkward. Yeah, there were a lot of scenes like when you fight the guy who, like, you know, took your son and stuff. I thought that whole scene was so bizarre and weird, and not to mention I was like massively angry that I had made like no player choice in this entire game, which was such a key point of like the Fallout games for a long time. You know, this isn't like a new franchise that Bethesda's making. It was like, I'm still playing a Fallout game, you know? It's like I'd be a lot more frustrated with Anthem's lack of choice if it was Mass Effect 4, you know? I'd be like, what do you mean I don't have impact on the characters I'm talking to? It's literally a Mass Effect game. Like, this is the foundation of what makes this game, you know? Like, to such a massive extent. Yeah.
It's just, like, Fallout 4 took it an extreme direction, especially with the other factions, where it's just like, converse with or kill.
It's so simplified, yeah. And that's where you do wonder if there's crossover, like a trade-off between, well, we couldn't really give you all this player choice because we had... I mean, you know that's why. They had to do all this voice acting, and I'm just like, give me the silent protagonist and give me back my 20 different freaking endings, you know? Like, Give me all of my actual player choice, like,
or at least that illusion of choice that a lot of people.
Yes, yeah, even the
like.
proper illusion of it. Yeah, like in Fallout 3 had a lot of that.
Oh,
Where you go back and replay it, but it's like on your first playthrough, you're not going to notice it, so it like works.
No, of course
Fallout
not.
4, yeah, it was. I mean, it was just gone because there was no, there was no illusion of choice. Even the game was just like, nah. It's like you're either going to shoot this person before you talk to him, or you're going to talk to him, and they're going to make you do one specific thing, and that's that.
Or you'll speech check and get the first shot.
Yeah.
Or a speech check and they'll shoot each other, and then you shoot the winner.
Yeah.
Fallout 4 in a nutshell.
I think that goes back to the games having to kind of be a little bit old school to be able to pull, like, the old school stuff off. And again, I'm totally okay with that. I don't think the masses are, which is why I think a game like The Outer Wilds is going to work, but only because they've already talked. If you watched a lot of the interviews recently with them on Game Informer, they've talked about, like, they've cut the game, like, they've already cut the game down. Like, every time they would start to build something, they'd get way too big, and then they'd chop it back down. They've already made, like, 2 cuts, they've said, in terms of, like, the scale of the game, because they're like, we can't afford it. We don't have the time for it. We don't have the resources, and it's like, the game will probably be better in the end for it anyway.
And that's what branching stories do. They have to they have to make decisions to make sure it stays in a I guess coherent.
Yeah, they can't suddenly realize they gave the player a choice where they now have to build, an entirely new zone.
Yeah,
just for it to make sense,
And I didn't get the most real concept of that until I started my first, like, Fallout 3 series, which was a choose your wasteland, like choose your own adventure type thing. I branched 6 times before leaving the vault. Don't do that.
Yeah, that's
probably 2.
No, that's horrible.
Yeah, that's a fun. I mean, I think, like, as a consumer, that's a fun personal project or experiment you can do.
Oh, it's so fun.
Just sit down and on paper just make, like, one of those choose your own adventures. Just a really simple one. Start off with, like, a character and 2 doors, but then try and expand it to 4 doors, and then see how much longer it takes you to even get 4 choices in.
How complicated the whole thing gets in a very short time.
You're just writing down words on paper, like.
Mm-hmm. And then I during that time I wondered why nobody was helping me with this thing, and I'm just like, on top of nobody really caring as much as I do, now I know how much work this takes.
Oh, yeah. Well, did each thing have, like, just 2 choices, or did you, like, try and mingle them back together?
I tried to converge on a couple of spots, but because I made it a boy, girl, and then a class decision out of the 3 classes that I ended up later playing on a Fallout 3 playthrough, then it just became just a mess.
Yep.
Like, I could recreate some videos for specific paths, but I would still have to split them off again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a mess. So, kind of that gave me a concept of understanding, like, what a branching story would do, and how hard it is to get it to come back if there's so many choices being made. And you'll notice that the really good developers, you don't really notice when it converges, but it does. and that's when I guess that represents, like, a good developer versus somebody who just kind of threw it together. And you just have a non-ending sometimes, something like that.
Well, it's a case of, if you don't converge it, like, your 6 choices in the vault would end up with, like, 64 different branches if there was no converging whatsoever, and each one was, like, truly unique, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And can't be made. Imagine a game with 64 different endings. I'm not sure if it's even one, and that's just 6 choices.
Yeah, I'm curious what Dying Light 2 has. The name Caedo. Chris, yes, he's helping them with the story because they're doing these branching interaction paths. But I think the way they're solving their issue is to give the player a lot of micro choices that have a finite end. That are based more in, like, an immediate action. So essentially, they break everything off. And one of the examples they gave was, you are in this part of the city, this old city that you're in now, and the water is shut off because there's a group of these bandits. So you've got, like, a couple ways you can go about this. I mean, number one, you could just ignore it, and then you'll never have, like, a fresh water supply in that. but that will also close off any assistance from this good character who's asking you to do that. You can then go in and you can take down the bandits in two ways. You can just kill them all and, you know, put the water back on, or you can essentially try to kill them but then like pin down their leader and basically get him to like disappear out of town. And so then they just give like basically one basic end result to like those choices type deal. I don't remember exactly how it played out, but the water comes back on. You now have benefits from, you know, the good character, or you could have went with the bad character and abandoned that, you know, just real simple. And like lots of those micro choices is like the way they're trying to like do that. I was like, that's pretty cool, because I feel like most of the time when a game does that, it's like a storytelling based game, like a Telltale game, you know, which also has a lot of false, you know, fake like divergences where you don't actually get to make a decision, but you did type deal. So I feel like that'll be a cool way. I'm interested to see how they handle it, and like if that even, it seems that game seems really ambitious. Like I love Dying Light, and I want Dying Light 2 to be amazing, but every time they talk about it, I'm just like, man, maybe just like pull off the cool parkour stamina stuff, guys. Like don't worry so much about all this other crazy stuff. But but I also feel like with a person like Chris on board, you know, he's got to have a good idea of like what's reasonable and what isn't. You know,
definitely,
based on their budget. So I feel like that's one of those, like that's gonna be like that crazy sleeper hit game. And speaking of RPGs, like while it's not like a focused RPG, I feel like that game could come out of nowhere and just be like everybody will be talking about it. So
yeah, and Nelsar, who was on the last PIPCAST, that's his and my game. Like we played co-op through that game twice
in the
twice
buggy,
together.
The open world expansion, like God, man. If you're listening to this right now, you should go buy that game and play it, by the way. So good. So good. It's literally, if you're like sitting there like, I wish there was a co-op zombie survival game, you know, that's like more action oriented anyway. That's literally the game, and it has parkour. It's so good.
Yeah. And it's very fun. We had a lot of shenanigans that I highlighted in Caedo's Casualties. At least two Casualties videos.
There's plenty of opportunities for that in that game, that's for sure. Definitely.
I got blown up several times with propane tanks that were thrown at me.
That were thrown at you
by my friend. All right, well, I guess we can move on to the to what are you playing / working on, because we're all creators here. We all have our own things going on. We all have our own games we like to play. Hopefully not the exact same as what we're working on, because that can drive you crazy pretty quickly.
Oh, yes.
So, what games have you been playing lately, Sarge?
Me, content-wise, as always, is Fallout 76, which is just like the standard stuff, just work, all of that good things. But casually, I've been playing the same games over and over. A bit of Magic the Gathering Arena still, which I'm actually trying to slowly wean myself off a little bit.
I saw you playing it beforehand.
Yeah, I might have played it a little bit beforehand. It's keep getting coins and build better. Oh no, too much of it, too much. I'm trying to limit myself to like maximum 5 matches a day. I'm trying to make it so I play 3 matches a day and then eventually just go on for like a match or 2 every other day, because previously I had 8 into my work schedule and I don't want that to start happening again. As a fun game to kind of get me more pumped up though, I've been playing more Apex Legends, but I've had differing experiences with it, because although it's a great game, I play with randoms and that can go horribly wrong.
Yeah, people are... Battle Royales are a fun, like, social study pool type thing, because of... Like, when you make... So, if you make guides for, like, a game in general, right? You can make, like, those really simplistic guides, and there's always those people who are like, no one needs this. And it's never true. But Battle Royales are, like, a really good demonstration of how wrong those people are. Like, if you tell people in a guide for a game like Apex Legends, like, you should strafe. You know, that means move to side while you shoot the person you're shooting at. A bunch of people will be like, people know that, like everyone knows that, and then I can upload like 1,000 clips of someone doing exactly not that as I kill them, you know? Just literally standing still in the open middle of a field, just like trying to shoot me, missing all their shots while I'm dancing around. Yeah, it's a fun experience with randoms, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've been noticing a lot over the past few days. I'll be playing like in a group of people, just randoms that I've teamed up with for a match, and there'll be like the level 4 person who's got like 1 kill so far, only played a couple of matches, who decides he's the jump master, we're jumping straight down
the hottest spot
in the midst of all the fighting, And I don't get why people do that, because there's always going to be like an actual team there who are working together.
Yeah,
and in the most
unless you're
dangerous
really
part,
prepared for that, it's probably best at level
Yeah.
4 to get comfortable with looting and like the map.
Yeah, but
It's the trial by fire, Joe.
yeah,
just like-
it never goes well.
I've been working
oh,
on a guide for Apex Legends, just like a beginner's mindset thing for battle royales, because they're a little, they're different from a typical first-person shooter, and that's like the first thing that I talk about is like, listen, you don't want to just always drop in the safe place, but like your first 10 matches, if you drop and don't ever have to shoot anyone for the first 15 minutes, that's okay, because there's a lot of other stuff to figure out.
Yeah,
Like, like go learn to loot, go learn to pick up some weapons, and then spend some time shooting people.
it's still a fun game, just a bit problematic at times. I think that's actually been it for what I've been playing as well. Oh no, actually, I jumped back into Final Fantasy 9 because yeah, well, whilst I've been working on scripts, because what have I been working on recently is a beginner's guide to Fallout 76, where I do all the really basic stuff that lots of people are going to comment saying everyone knows this.
It'll help a bunch of people out though.
Yeah, but whilst I've been writing that up, I've been watching speed runs of the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasies, and because I've been watching them all, I've wanted to go back to those games, so I've played a little bit of Final Fantasy 9, because I love that game. For now and ever.
Awesome.
It's just great.
That's good. When are you going to make guides for that?
Oh, I would love... Actually, the first ever videos I made on my channel were Final Fantasy 9 based. But I did delete them. And now there's only like a stream or two. But no, I'd love to make videos on that game, but the 6 people that watch it wouldn't really pay my bills. So it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's actually an interesting niche that's not really explored on YouTube is like retro guides. There's all these retro reviews, right? And like any era, I mean, pick it. There's people who do reviews of like 2000s, PC first-person shooters. And I would just think if somebody started an entire channel where they just picked old games and just started, doing like guides for them, like little guide series, like just playthrough guides, whatever, it's item guides. That's like a hard one because you gotta like roll the luck, on something that nobody's doing right now and see if it picks up. But I just feel like that's such an like no one does that really. I mean, you've done a few of those, Caedo. I've seen like a handful maybe for some old games. But like there's so many games that people don't play because they're so difficult to play, because there's no, apart from like looking at old forum posts, there's not many people talking about how to get through like, this portion of Fallout Tactics, for example.
Like what's that's a good question actually. If you could pick your favorite game to go back to that you with confidence could make content on, which one would it be?
Mine wouldn't even be that old, unfortunately. I would just go play Destiny again because Destiny 2 is like incredible right now. But no one like, I don't know, like I feel like maybe with covering Anthem, like I want to make a Destiny video this weekend and talk about why I think it's a good time to go back to the game. They're doing a lot of cool stuff with these upsurge like style bounties they're going to give players. So the biggest problem I have with the game right now is it's like a super heavy hobby game, which is great for people who play only Destiny. But if you're someone who plays a lot of other games and takes like month-long breaks from it, you come back and they're like, hey, here's this new content. By the way, you got to be, power level 450. Go play for 10 hours and get your power level back up. Now you just pick up these bounties from the Drifter and you can complete them in like an hour, and it'll give you a full set of gear that matches the new power level. So you'll still have to like go out and get like other interesting pieces of loot, but you'll at least be at that power level. And I'm like, that's super smart. Like I'd gladly cover this game again. It's just so much fun to play for me.
Yeah, Sarge, would Final Fantasy 9 be yours, or?
I think it might be, because as soon as you said that, I had like half a dozen different guides. Because I used to do like not 100% runs of like those games, but as close as you can to it. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff built into the game that also means you can't make 100% of it, because there's a speedrun element, but that means you can't complete other stuff. And how the world opens up of it. There is so much stuff I could go over. I could work on it for like a year straight, full time, and I don't think I'd cover everything I want to.
Yeah, yeah, Final Fantasy 9 is one of those, because like even Tetramaster, that would have its own like whole thing.
Yeah,
I don't know if you played Final Fantasy 9, right, Tony?
No, I was never a Final Fantasy guy.
Yeah, Tetramaster is the card game in Final Fantasy 9, and like you need to finish specific like prerequisites or like mini games to get certain cards, or like find them during a particular part of the game that you can't come back to, and that's just excluding like the rules of the cards even.
Yeah, it's
and the stats they roll with.
it's a very complicated card game, to the point
Yeah.
of, I was saying I watched speed runs of like that game. The majority of the speed runners just go, oh, it's all random, and there's like maybe 4 or 5 who actually understand how the card game works. Those are people who are like the top tier players of the game, who don't even fully get it all.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. Yeah, my knee jerk was actually when that question came to my mind. It wasn't Final Fantasy VII, even though that's my like go-to for like nostalgia JRPG that's never going to touch my channel type of thing. But actually, I was going to go with Legend of Mana and the Mana series.
Damn, dude. My mom used to be,
which would give me some
big into those.
Yeah, which would give me extra incentive to go back and play Secret of Mana, which I had never completed.
Is that the one on GameCube? Which one's on GameCube? Are they all on GameCube? I don't even remember.
No, they were further back than that.
Okay, I'm thinking of a different game.
Oh, my voice is dying. I did like 3 hours of commentary before this, so
Oh dear.
sorry. But Legend of Mana is one that was hard to get into, but once you were in it, you were super invested. It had so many interesting like build your own world type mechanics to it that a lot of it was ahead of its time and kind of treated like a sandbox, but the worlds themselves, or the areas themselves in the world, were kind of self-contained. It's kind of hard to explain.
I just looked it up. I do know which game you're talking about now. I was just thinking of something different,
but like you would get artifacts that you could place on the map, and those would become a location. The further that location is from your place, the more difficult the enemies are there, and then depending on the places connected to it, would determine the mana levels of that place, and those mana levels would determine the quests that would show up. Like, it was... And those are just the areas in the game. You had equipment that you could custom make. You had basically any enemy you encountered, you could get a pet version of it, except for the bosses. You could encounter spirits that you would play music to. You could custom make those instruments to play music to those spirits, and get coins from those spirits to make more instruments or modify your weapons or gear. It was just like way over the top. Oh, and you could harvest produce from your tree to feed to your pets, and the produce would determine their personalities. Like, it was way overboard with all the things that you could do.
That sounds bonkers.
And this is a PS1 era game. Like, think like XCOM when it came out for DOS. People played the crap out of that game simply because of how much there was actually in it for a DOS/early Windows game. And no joke, it got a re-release on the PS1. I guess a director's cut type version, simply because of how good it was, or how detailed it was and ahead of its time. But Legend of Mana was like the one I go back to every so often just to be like, ooh, this is good. And I think there was like nine or more weapon types too, all with their own special abilities that you could learn and stuff like that. It was nuts. Tony, what have you been playing lately?
I think we pretty much covered everything I've been playing for the most part, so I won't drag us out too much longer. But yeah, Apex, Anthem. Right. I still go back and play like Monster Hunter World whenever they do the event thing, but
oh yeah,
Metro. But we can talk about. Actually, no, Metro is out. I keep thinking Metro wasn't actually out yet. Metro is really good.
It's out.
Metro's really good.
You did a stream on it.
Metro is really good. I do like it.
So the last couple weeks, Nelson and I were talking about it the last podcast. We were like, we're gonna play it after we're done, and I did, and I finished it between then and now, and it was good. I enjoyed it. It was very story continuey, as you would expect from a narrative type game. I kind of like to compare it on the narrative side to the Wolfenstein games, because they kind of have a story that you follow. Through the sequels kind of thing, and you're following the same character. It's Artyom. Your whole Sparta squad is leaving the tunnels. And it was a fun experience. I ran into a couple of issues that definitely told you that this was a AA more than a AAA game. Like some of the enemy AI felt pretty old. I guess that's the nicest way to put it. The stealth mechanics are still not great.
Yeah, they're super basic. Throw some knives at some guys and don't get seen. That's it.
And don't let the bodies you leave get seen either, or even the knocked out
That's
people,
the plan.
because they will automatically know where you are.
Everywhere.
I got super frustrated in a certain camp when I knocked somebody out on one end of it. I snuck all the way around to the other end of it, and suddenly everybody was shooting at me.
Yeah, it's weird. I think it's always been their games have always been really inconsistent with that too, where sometimes they won't know and then other times they like laser beam you. It's super yeah, I liked it from a overall gameplay perspective. I just like, it felt like kind of like a stalker game. I appreciated that.
Yeah. I never played a stalker game, so like
yeah, it was a good touch of that. Like I just like the open world, like sandboxy combat stuff. The story is kind of like at this point, I guess I just get tired of them wasting characters in that series. Like everything's RTM all the time. Ana gets treated like the most useless character ever, even though she's supposed to be this legendary sniper for the Order. And you're always saving her, and it gets so irritating every time you have to save her. And then the one time she saves RTM in that game, she like immediately is just like, is everything okay? Like, it's like, dude, you just slit that guy's throat. I think you're perfectly capable. And then the same thing with the rest of his Spartan Order. Like, you barely get to interact with them. And the few times you do, they're all like throwing their lives away. And I'm just like, God, man, there's more characters here. Like, you could at least give them a little bit more respect. But other than that, definitely excited for March, though. Get some good stuff like March and April.
Yeah. But, so yeah, Metro Exodus was one. Deep Rock Galactic, obviously. Been enjoying that a lot. Streamed it last week, I guess, since this comes out Sunday. With Nelsar again. That was a lot of fun. We had Necromancer Raft, one of my patrons, join in on the squad for a little bit. Kept saving his butt, because a little lower level than the rest of us. And we gave him crap along the way. It was pretty fun. Hi, Raft. Obviously Fallout 76, I was helping you, Sarge, a little bit with leveling up, hopefully a little bit.
Yeah.
I was very exhausted that day, I think.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I was pretty tired. What else is new? And been playing Fortnite Save the World, particularly Thursday, when they dropped the big new hero update for like their entire hero rework. So instead of every hero having this slew of perks, they now have heroes that you can main, and then team abilities, and then heroes you can slot in to give you different perks to modify the hero that you're using. So
Nice.
Your main hero is like your weapon, and then the other heroes are like your materia. That's the best way I could describe it. So we had a lot of fun with that yesterday. Man, we're almost 2.5 hours in. Holy
We
crap.
are. It's been a long recording.
Well, okay. Should we just go to the final notes thing?
I
Like,
think
can
we
feel my
can
voice
wrap this up because
Okay. Explode.
we might accidentally kill a
Vocal
Caedo.
cords.
Yeah, save your missed one. First off, thanks to everyone for listening, as it has been a very long podcast. If you've made it to this point, we are all impressed with you. We will have links to various bits and bobs in the description for anything that's relevant. I mean, I was going to say the Fallout 3 thing, but that's been deleted, so why would we have a link to that? It doesn't exist. Anything that needs to be there will be there. Feel free to put in the comments as well if you're questioning anything we talk about, and I go through the comments anyway. If there is a question, we can always be like, oh yeah, the link's here, or oh, this is the answer to it. Bit of a call to action for us now. Tony, if you want to plug your stuff quickly.
Yeah, I mostly do things over on YouTube, but you can also catch me on Twitch. If you literally just search Tony Mo on YouTube, it'll come up. Just look for the blue circle with the guy with the beard in it, and that's me. I'm sure they'll have some links down there as well. But yeah, if you like Anthem stuff, I mean, not to mention, honestly, if you just wanted to like go see what someone's done over the past 6 years, you could go to my YouTube channel, and there is like a discussion for everything. There's a lot of coverage for games like Titanfall 2 and even Fallout, but there's also, I think, well over like 200 or 300 videos of me just talking about random games over the last 6 years. So you could watch me, make some super old XCOM guide and then watch me play Anthem if you want. So yeah. There's that.
If I want some kind of relaxing background footage talking about gaming, I'll sometimes just go go to your channel, find a playlist, just be like, oh yeah, there's 100 videos talking about video games. Let's just have that roll. That's good.
Some stuff in there I don't even remember making, so watcher be warned, but most of it's probably at least listenable.
Caedo, I mean, you're on his channel right now, so chances are you've found him already, but is there anywhere else you want to plug, Caedo?
I've made a pretty consistent schedule now where I live stream on Tuesdays and the Let's Plays go up Wednesdays and Fridays, and I try to have guides between Thursday and Saturday. So I try to fill up the week with stuff, but Tuesdays streaming is guaranteed. So if you want to come hang out on a live setting, come hang out on Tuesdays.
Yeah. What time is that?
Afternoon-ish Pacific.
Afternoonish Pacific, perfect.
It's my Friday for my work schedule, so
yeah.
Like if I get enough sleep, I'm streaming earlier in the day. If I don't, then I stream in the evening, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Until I actually get a consistent schedule on that. I don't think I ever will. I also love the interaction. That's the main thing.
Oh yeah.
And speaking of, yeah, if anybody in the comments wants to comment or even suggest things for the podcast, please do. PIPCAST 3000 is going to be going up bi-weekly, not every single week. I don't think I could handle that. But suggestions for future topics, if you wanted to add anything about the Fallout 76 roadmap and stuff like that, we're going to be talking about that a lot probably next several months.
Oh yeah, well next time the PIPCAST comes out, we'll have had content drop just a few days before. I think when we record it, it'll be like a day or two afterwards, so
yeah,
we'll be talking a lot about that, I imagine.
And other games too, like Devil May Cry 5, that's coming in about a week. So anyway, yeah, stick around and hit that bell, subscribe, whatever.
Do all the good things.
You think that's cool. And we hope to see you in the next couple weeks with the next PIPCAST. If not, I hope you have a good time and take care and all that good stuff. Was that okay?
That's good.
I am so
yeah.
I feel my throat hurts.
I can tell.